Vivian dreamed of having an older sister, but not much older. Just a year or two, no more. She knew how older girls treated the younger ones. They could play when there was no one else to play with. But when someone from their company appeared, they'd chase them away and they'd start doing their own thing. Even if the games, then not such in which you can allow the younger ones. But my sister's a year older, almost the same age, but not quite twins. I didn't want either. What good would it do to be like someone else? But she didn't have any sisters, and she didn't have any brothers. No older ones, no younger ones. She was alone at her mum's. She was alone most of the time because her mum worked. And after work, she often went out on her grown-up errands. And even if she was home, she didn't pay attention. And Vivian stayed out of the way, sitting quietly in her corner. She knew even in her early childhood that her mother wanted to get married. And Vivian wanted that too, to make her mum's wish come true. Marriage. That meant she would have a daddy like the other girls. Mum wouldn't leave the house in the evenings, or the three of them would go out. But Daddy never showed up. Sometimes Vivian could hear Mum saying to her friends, "If it wasn't for this extra, I'd have been married 10 times by now," and pointing at her, at Vivian. "So you've been married 20 times, not for long, really," chuckled her friends. "Oh, come on. I left her for what, didn't I? I've got my hopes up for her dad, for Ashley. Oh, how I hoped. I mean, he said we'd get married and everything would be fine. And then he ran off. I should have trusted him. But I didn't believe the others either. That's the way it is. We'll get married, we'll live together. And then..." Vivian didn't understand much about these conversations, but she was afraid to ask again. She knew what the answer would be. Don't you eavesdrop on adult conversations. And a slap on the wrist. Somehow, Vivian and her mum didn't have a particularly good relationship. And then Mum's husband turned up. Vivian was told to call him Daddy and obey him. Vivian didn't mind doing that. But this Daddy himself did not communicate with her very much. And with Mum he fought more and more, argued on some unknown to the girl reasons, was drunk all the time. Mum's marriage ended badly. For some reason they had to pack up and leave their flat. Mum had sold it, I think. Vivian only remembered crying and saying to her friends, "What can I do, otherwise he'll be locked up or killed? I can't live without him." It ended badly. It is not known where this Daddy went after they moved to some strange house, but one day Vivian was taken from kindergarten not by her mum, but by some strangers. They explained that Mum had fallen very ill and Vivian would now have to live in a children's home. No matter how bad the relationship with her mother was, Vivian grieved for her terribly. At first she cried all the time, asking to go to her. The girl was sure that her mother had died, but no, it turned out that she just from worries very much drunk and got under the car. The fault was all hers. She was walking drunk on the crossing with a bottle of vodka in her bag. So it was all her own fault. And the injuries were so serious that she couldn't be helped. So she was sent straight from the hospital to the home for the disabled. Where else? She's paralyzed and there's no one to look after her. And no flat. She sold her flat for her husband, who disappeared. That's how the family life ended. Mum wasn't deprived of her parental rights. It was thought that one day she would recover and take her daughter home. I mean, that's what they told Vivian. Adults realized that would never happen, but kind people took the girl to see her mum a few times. That was at first, and then they decided that the sooner the girl gets away from her mother, the easier it would be. And in general, there's no time to deal with such things. Your mum's only thing to do was to get under a car when she was drunk. And now she's an invalid, she's lying there in a home for the disabled, and we have to deal with you. Vivian replied to Vivian's requests to take her to her mum. You'll grow up and take her home. She is young, she is still lying down. Vivian, when she grew up a little, sometimes started to run away from the orphanage, not to vagabond, but to her mother, even though they did not have a particularly close relationship. Although the girl began to understand that her mother did not really love her. But she was the only person she had, and she was sure that when she grew up she would really take her home. But where would that home be? And the time in the orphanage dragged on for so long. Days went by, day after day, according to their own laws. And Mum lying in that invalid house, and she was not well and Vivian was not well. She remembered she wasn't exactly an orphan. The others remembered that, so she had no friends. Both carers and teachers did not like the girl, scolded. You ran away again. Just try again, I'll run away for you. We are responsible for you with our heads. Remember that. Like your mom, for example, you'll fly into some accident. We'll be responsible. And Vivian really wanted to run away all the time, to be away from this orphanage, and that nobody would be responsible for her and nobody would touch her at all. It was a strange experience to live like that. It seemed to be completely lonely. And at the same time, there are people around all the time, and everybody wants something from you all the time. Teachers want her to learn, and carers want her to behave in a certain way. Peers need something too, and yet it was lonely, like in space, and bad. Especially after Jonathan, the guy she befriended, was released from the orphanage, and probably the only person she developed such a friendship with. He was a couple of years older than Vivian, but they'd let him out without even waiting for him to finish high school, sending him off to college with no small amount of relief. That was because that boy was always too much trouble. He also ran away often, but not to visit his parents. Yes, he wasn't an orphan. His father and mother were alive and well. They were in prison, and Jonathan was not going to visit them, but to be free and not to follow what he thought were stupid rules. The management of the orphanage could hardly wait until this guy could be released. Everyone was sure that during his escapades he did not shy away from breaking the law, probably stealing petty cash, associating with some bad companies. Leaving him in an orphanage will teach others bad habits. I mean, how many things can these youngsters do with illegal substances and other offenses? Vivian had been warned not to have anything to do with him. The old school mistress had said, without further ado, "Look, Vivian, he's going to make you a baby. What's going to happen? I don't even know. You'll be kicked out of the orphanage, and you've got nowhere to go and with a baby in your arms. Or do you want to increase the number of orphanages?" "What are you talking about? There's nothing like that between us. We're just friends." The girl was indignant. "I'm sure we are. Since it's friendship that starts everything with you two, you're not the first. Every year some friend of yours gets pregnant out of the blue. And you're a bright girl. You should finish school, go on to further studies. That's your salvation. What if you get involved with the wrong person? Well, then, I don't know what will happen to you, but the fact is, it won't be good." Vivian understood all this, but at the same time she wanted to be an adult as soon as possible. Jonathan had already been released, even though he wasn't even 17 yet. And why should she sit in a children's home and obey the tutors until she came of age? After all, she has a mum, and she wants to take her out of the home for the disabled and live with her. Why is that impossible? She would now quite well cope, and with the care of the sick, and she could work and study. It wouldn't hurt. But it was impossible to just leave. Even though it was too much to be here, she had no one to talk to. The only good thing was that Jonathan visited her sometimes, even though he was strictly forbidden to come to the orphanage. They were afraid of any mischief from him, so they met secretly. And one day the young man suggested to her, "Why are you suffering here? Run away from here and the matter is over." "Where would I go? They can at least give you a flat after graduation. Have you seen these flats? Do you think they give orphans something decent? A palace apartment. You'll say the same thing, a room in some barrack. That's all. For the sake of that, to endure deprivation for a few years, there's nothing for you to do." "All right, I agree with you. But where am I going to run to? I don't even have a room now. I can't live on the street." "No one is forcing you to the street. You'll be with me. Don't you realize that I love you and invite you to live with me? I'll get a nice room and we'll live, work, earn money. And when we do, we can buy anything we want. You want a house in the suburbs? You know how nice they're building these days. You want a flat in the center. You're such a dreamer. How much is that flat worth? You'd have to work for 100 years. It depends on where you work. I know good places that pay better than others, and you'll get a job too, and the two of us will make money in no time. Don't worry." "So you're asking me to get married?" the girl asked timidly. After all, she wouldn't mind that at all. And haven't you realized it yet? Of course, live together, then get married. You can't do that now, you little girl. Jonathan kissed her. Or do you mind? No, of course I don't mind at all. I've wanted to live like normal adults for a long time. It's just that I wanted to take my mom, and she'll probably need treatment, and that costs money too. Well, how can you take her away if you live in an orphanage? But if you build everything, earn money. Then you can talk about taking your mother. But I don't know why you need her if doctors can't cure her for 10 years. What are you going to do yourself? All right, don't take offense. If you want to take her away, do you want to take her away? I don't forbid it, and I won't be against it. When we live together, she'll just have her own room. Let her lie there. Then she'll start to come round a little. I don't think she'll mind either. Vivian thought. It was a little scary to decide to make such a final escape. After all, she had never lived on her own. Always someone had taken care of her. First her mum, then at the orphanage, good or bad, but there were always people who thought about her, that she had a place to live, something to wear, and now she would have to do it all on her own, without any skills. But then she reassured herself. She would not be alone, but with him. Jonathan had been living on his own for a year now, and he seemed to be doing well. He dressed well, always brought her something good to eat, and didn't forget the other boys. He has money, which means he's got a job after all. And from the looks of it, it's not a bad job. Plus he promises to help. So why should she say no? And he's right that waiting till she's of age is too long and stupid. She'll have to live in an orphanage for another 3 years, and there's no telling what will happen after she graduates. And if she leaves now, starts working and earning, then in a year she will be quite a normal, independent person. Still, it was a little scary. Jonathan, on the other hand, seemed eager to get his way. One day he turned up at Vivian's house for another date. You know, I'm sick of all this too. I'm waiting for you, I'm trying to persuade you, but life goes on. You don't feel the time draining away. Nothing positive is happening between us. But what should be happening? You want us to run away right now? Vivian was startled. Yes, imagine that. What's there to wait for? It's better to get it all over at once, your favorite orphanage. I've decided to go to the sea. I'm on holiday. I want to go with you. Do you understand? So why right now? We should at least finish the school year. It was the month of May, and the girl was finishing 9th grade. She remembered the words about the importance of education. Good girl. Finish this year, start next year, and then you'll think of something else. Look, I've already bought the tickets. Okay, so we have to go. We leave in 2 hours. Let's go. Suddenly, Vivian decided to go. And just like that, without a second thought, she set off with her lover, not knowing where she was going. On the way to the railway station, she tried to find out from Jonathan what would happen to them now. Where would they go when they returned? Would they have enough money for such a long journey, to live in a place where no one was waiting for them, and no one knew them? But the boy only waved it off. Vivian seemed to Vivian that he had explained everything, and partly she herself also felt perfectly happy and free. The fact that they were going with her lover as if on a wedding trip, that she would finally see the sea in other cities for the first time, people she would never have met if she had stayed where she was. That Jonathan truly loved her. There was no question about that now. He had come and taken her away, like in a novel, like in some adventure film. Even better, because everything was really happening to her, to herself. Of course, there were doubts and remorse. She ran away without warning anyone, without even writing a note. But they'll be looking for her. They'll report her to the police. And I didn't take any documents, and I didn't have any belongings with me. I tried to share these thoughts with my lover. Oh, there you go again, Vivian. What things do you need? We'll buy everything there on the spot. I have money, and if I need it, I'll get more. And if you don't have your papers on you, that's even better. You can send everyone away, and no one will find you, because they don't know who you are. Who won't find you? The girl wondered. Well, you say so yourself from the orphanage. Those very same people will be looking for you, and who knows who else. And so you are above suspicion altogether. You look completely innocent and trustworthy. You're just a girl from a good family. Eyes slammed shut, standing on the edge. I don't know anything. Vivian didn't like that explanation very much. Where's he going to get money from in a foreign land? What's that got to do with her innocent look? Yes, there was a vague doubt. They'd said all sorts of things about Jonathan. Maybe he had something bad on his mind, but the noise of euphoria drowned out those doubts. She's going to the seaside with her lover. No matter what he was up to, Jonathan wouldn't involve his wife in anything dubious. He loves her. It was hard not to guess that Jonathan was up to something, moreover, that he was doing it right at the beginning of the journey. His tickets, as it turned out, had not been taken to their destination. They got off at the first station, got on another train without tickets, then another. Then they hitchhiked, again on trains. These wild journeys might well have bored the girl, but she was suddenly taken up with a little adventure. For too long it had been necessary to live under strict control without being able to depart from the prescribed rules. Sometimes Vivian swore, but more often she laughed with Jonathan. Besides, she wasn't quite sure what he was doing, or what he was doing that could be dangerous. Only when she was almost there, sitting at the next station, did she watch Jonathan pocketing his crumpled money. Still she asked, "Jonathan, what is this? Have you been stealing on the trains there?" "Never mind, it's nothing, believe me. See how cleverly it worked out. Now we can have a month's holiday without any trouble. We'll clothe you. We'll eat all kinds of good stuff. And remember, I didn't take one last thing from anybody." First or last, Vivian didn't like the whole thing. And not even because she was afraid of going to jail. She wasn't afraid of that. What was she in for? Yeah, she was scared for Jonathan, but ashamed of herself. She was using the money and knowing that the man she loved was stealing, she was calm about it. She didn't try to keep him away. I mean, she tried. Sometimes she said that it is impossible to act like that. It is bad for other people and dangerous for herself. But in return, she'd hear. What do you suggest? Should I starve to death? With you together? After all, it's great for us. We're free to do whatever we want. Or do you want to go back to the orphanage? Porridge in the morning, soups, great cutlets for lunch, 3 biscuits for dinner. Yes, I'd rather die than live like that. With this, Vivian was in general agreement, but, "Jonathan, I'll die if you go to jail." "I'm not going to get caught, and I'm not going to go to jail." "I'll go to jail. What's the big deal? There are people in jail too. It's no big deal. Let them catch me." At first, of course, they were caught when they were on their way back to their town. They didn't get there far enough. In the neighboring town, they got caught. Oh, Vivian was frightened. She couldn't say a word. She could see that Jonathan was scared too, confused, mumbling. They were taken to the police station. They were taken to separate rooms. Vivian was questioned by a young investigator, a very strict man. When she could see that he was convinced in advance that she was as guilty as Jonathan. Maybe she had behaved quite wrongly. She'd refused everything, had not answered some questions at all. She didn't have any documents. For some reason, Jonathan thought she was safe without documents, but in fact, it turned out to be the opposite. No passport. So she's guilty of more than she realized. She's probably been involved in criminal activity for a long time. And this despite the fact that she's only recently turned 16. Fear and hopelessness made Vivian burst into tears. Missing, she's completely missing. Now she's going to be sent to juvenile detention. She'll be a criminal, and that's a lifelong stigma. Never again would she be a normal person, always just a criminal, albeit an ex-con. And she didn't mean any harm, but who would believe her now? Turns out there is someone. An elderly policeman came into the office. He asked mockingly, "Well, you won't confess anything? Well, maybe there's nothing to confess." "What do you mean, nothing?" "Traveling around the country together." That she didn't know what her partner was up to. Not only that, but she was probably involved. She was probably distracting people, and this one was cleaning his pockets. The young man disagreed with him. "Why doesn't he say anything?" "It's because they don't admit it at first. He's trying to make you feel sorry for him." To the older policeman sighed. "No, sweetheart, there's no one to pity you here," said the young policeman. "Oh, come on, because the culprit has been found. I made inquiries. She ran away from the orphanage. That bastard with her was doing exactly what you say, and there's nothing on her." "You're wasting your time," he objected to his young colleague. "So what? It's a waste of a girl's life." Then they left the office, arguing among themselves, apparently about Vivian's fate, and the more experienced one probably won. The young man never came in again, and the elderly man came in and said, "So they're letting you go on all four sides. Are you going to the orphanage?" "I'll help you. I'll give you a ticket." "No," Vivian shuddered. "I'm not going back there." "So really, was it that bad there?" The policeman wondered. "Bad, horribly bad. It's going to be even worse. I mean, I won't even be accepted." "I guess you're right here. That's how I figured it too, that no one's eager to take you in. They'll send you to a place where people like you don't belong, a penal colony. So what are you going to get out of there?" 2 years from now. A criminal, so I defended you. But what to do next? I don't know." "Thank you. What's your name?" she asked. "Oliver. I sent an inquiry to your orphanage. They should send your papers. I'll give it to you tomorrow. But where will you go? Tell me a favor, love. Do you have any relatives?" "Mom is, but she's in the home for the disabled." Tears came to the girl's eyes again. "That I already know. And besides her, then there's no one." "So well, there you see. What am I to do with you? Will you order me to?" The policeman was apparently seriously disturbed by this question. "You'll just let me go, if you can," said Vivian timidly. "I promise I won't do anything wrong. I don't want to go to the colony myself." "You're good. But you have to live somewhere and on something. And that could well make you hit rock bottom, if not all the way down. Then a lot of it. I'm sorry, I can't help you there. I'll go to work somewhere myself sometime. I'll sleep at the station." "That's a good start, I'll say," the policeman said thoughtfully. "Hanging around railway stations. I'll tell you what. We have some abandoned houses on the outskirts of the city, but already in the city limits. When one of them is small, but it's strong and clean. There's some furniture, things, and utensils. I mean, you can live. Come on, I'll take you there and show you around." Vivian was a little frightened by this suggestion. The man seemed kind, but he was a man. There was no telling what he had in mind. Oliver guessed her doubts. "Don't be afraid of me. If you couldn't be afraid of me, I'd be old enough to be your father. If I wanted something bad, I wouldn't have taken you and I wouldn't have defended you against Clinton. You know, he's like a bulldog. He's a bulldog. He won't let go. He'd certainly put him in the penal colony." "Why did you stand up for him?" she wondered. "I told you. I'm fit to be a father. I had a girl just like you. Like you got mixed up with one. And it all ended badly. I don't have a daughter now," the policeman gloomed. He did not deceive her. He brought her to a pretty little house in the middle of a grassy and bushy plot, taught her how to heat the cooker, showed her what a heater will eat to prevent a fire, and how not to burn herself. "What if the owners come?" Vivian was worried. "Well, they'll come, and then you'll go away. That's all there is to it. I hope you won't stay here forever. Get a job of some kind, and then you'll get a place to live. And then maybe you'll meet a nice man. Get married, live like everyone else." Vivian wanted to ask where she should look for a job, but she thought that was too much. This kind man had done so much for her already. He had also slipped some money into her hand, embarrassed by his kindness. She almost wept at such participation. "I'll give it all to you, Oliver. I'll just earn it and give it to you. All right? I'll give you the papers when they come from your orphanage. I'll drop them off. So don't run out of here, and don't mess with anyone. There could be all sorts of people here," her savior mumbled to Vivian. And she began to live in someone else's house. At first, it was a little scary to be alone in an unfamiliar room, but then she got used to it. How many years in the orphanage she dreamed of being alone, and then had to be among people who had to be afraid. So what was there to be afraid of alone? The childhood dream came back again. For some reason, her sister wanted her mother to live with her, not Jonathan. But she saw her sister, who had never existed, as if in reality, she wanted her to be near her. But instead of her sister, a puppy had wandered in. Well, it's a teenager now, probably abandoned by someone, maybe lost. One little guy whining. You can see that he's hungry, that this loneliness torments him a lot. Well, let's live together. I'll have more fun. And you too. We just need to sort out the food, Vivian thought. The money Oliver had left behind couldn't last long, especially with a ward like that. Vivian could get by on bread and milk, but he needs meat. He's a growing boy. But Vivian found a way to work at the farmer's market. It was called that for old time's sake, though there were no collective farms around. And there were private farms, and people sold the fruits of their labors there. They didn't need any special help. They tried to manage themselves, but the girl managed to tidy up there or drag something from place to place. It was as if the women, mostly elderly, traded, paid with food, sometimes with money. But the money was meager. It was hardly possible to save up to rent a flat, but they didn't let her starve. Neither she nor Polkan, such a formidable name she gave her dog, which, by the way, promised to grow big and formidable. In the meat row, she managed to get bones and meat scraps, so Polkasha was not offended. And the only bad thing was that it was getting towards autumn, and then winter would be right around the corner. Vivian thought more and more about how she would survive in the cold. Yes, there was a stove, but there was no fuel. And there was enough wood and wood chips for cooking, but for heating and warm clothes she had no fuel. Where would it come from? And that was what led her to the decision to visit the nearby dump. Vivian didn't want to turn into a rubbish seeker by any means. She knew it was a sure way to sink, to lose her self-respect. But since the situation was desperate, especially since she'd seen people throw away some pretty good stuff, Vivian decided to take only what was necessary, and not to carry everything that seemed in any way usable into the house. She'd find a jacket, some boots, and she'd never go to the dump again. In the meantime, she sometimes visited with Polkan. With him was not boring, not scary, and he had the ability to search for all sorts of treasures, as if he knew what his mistress wanted. Once he had brought a perfectly intact, even decent warm hat, which Vivian had gratefully taken on the day that had changed her life to a great extent. Vivian walked along the edge of the junkyard without going any deeper. She always walked like this and watched to see if any other searchers would show up. It was not safe to run into them in the first place, and secondly, not very pleasant. She didn't want to be in their company. Luckily for her, the area was empty. That is, there were no people, but there was nothing useful in the pile of multicolored junk. And suddenly a car, a fancy SUV, turned off a nearby motorway and drove up to the edge of the dump. Vivian was wary, stepped behind the nearest bush. Rich people, as it was known, often throw away something that had become unnecessary to them, not because it was completely unusable, but simply boring, but quite good things. This car was still choosing a place to stop. Vivian was already dreaming. What if this rich man's wife was bored with some clothes, a jacket or a coat? It would be very useful to her. The man did get out of the car, but what he pulled out didn't look like clothes at all. Just some sort of multicolored scrawl. A toy? Without much of a swing, the man tossed it into the rubbish. He got in his car and drove off. Vivian could see that the discarded item was of no use to her, but it was interesting. What's that? As the rich man drove away in his fancy car, she walked over to the place and realized it was a child's scooter. It's a very popular toys, and this one seems to be in one piece. Vivian was not lazy, went to the scooter, took it out to the road, checked it. Yes, perfectly intact. It hadn't been used very long. The wheels are barely scratched. Those rich people. If your kid doesn't want it, he's had enough. So give it to someone else. Give it to the kids in the yard. But no, not lazy to drive to dump and throw it away, so that neither yourself nor people, at least they didn't break it. Well, we're not proud, are we, Polkan? We'll take it and give it to the kids. Let them ride, she said to her friend. Yes, her lonely life had taught her to talk to her dog. She couldn't ride the scooter herself. It was designed for a different weight and size, so she rode beside him, holding one handle. She was approaching the house when the rubber stopper slipped off the handle. So much for the defect, Vivian grinned. But she could put it back on in a second. As she bent over to put the plug back on, she noticed that there was something sticking out of the hollow handle, kind of like a rag. I pulled. It came out hard. Probably a child's hiding place. I pulled out a neat little bundle, unwrapped it, and gasped. A rather massive gold chain was wrapped in a handkerchief, and on it a gold pendant with stones, obviously not glass. No, it's not a child's stash. But whose is it? The man who threw the scooter away clearly didn't know about the hidden jewel, but who would put a fortune in a child's toy. It belongs to her now, Vivian, and it wasn't stolen. She just found it, She couldn't give it back to its owner if she wanted to. And why would she want to? It's worth a lot of money and selling it could solve a lot of problems. And not just for her, Vivian. After all, she's going to help her mom too, once she's back on her feet. But it was too early to make plans now. It was necessary to find out how much her find would be valued. She didn't want to delay the realization of the expensive item. The very next day, she went to a pawn shop near the market. However, already approaching, she suddenly felt vague doubts. Is she doing the right thing? Would it be too suspicious that she, a young, poorly dressed girl, came to sell an expensive piece of jewelry? The girl was handing over a piece of jewelry worth a lot of money. But Vivian calmed herself. What nonsense. What do they care, the pawnbroker, who brought what? Rather, he will try to count an inexperienced girl. Well, to this Vivian was ready, as she does not know the price of the product. But she would not agree to a very small one. The thing is obviously gold, and the stones are not simple. And the appraiser was an old man who, having accepted the item and examined it, looked at Vivian in a strange, meaningful way. And the jewelry is rare, expensive. I need to consult. Wait a moment, and left the room. I think there's trouble brewing. What a fool I am. I should have called Oliver for advice, she thought with annoyance. But it was too late to do anything now. All she could do was wait. And she waited not only for the appraiser, but also for the police, who arrived at the call of the panic button. They took both the girl and the pendant and took her to the police station. There they explained to her that it was not a simple piece of jewelry, but a family heirloom. And it is in the case of a missing person, namely the woman who owned the pendant. All of Vivian's explanations about the dump and the children's toy in which the pendant was hidden were not taken into account, and they found her personality extremely ambiguous. Lives in an abandoned house. Who is she? Where did she come from? No clue. They just waved her off when they asked her to call. Where are you going to call? Tell me you have your own lawyer. Does he live in the dump too? There's no reception there. They mocked her. Not at the dump. He works for the police and he knows me. And he knows I'm not a criminal. His name is Oliver. Vivian couldn't remember the name or title of her advocate out of fear. Yeah, well, you're not a criminal either. You're a heroine. Scavenging through junkyards and mining for gold and scooters. All right, let her call her Oliver. Maybe they're in the same gang. I don't think the woman herself has gone anywhere. One of the cops finally agreed. Vivian called, confused about her problem, and Oliver soon arrived to explain himself to his colleagues. Of course, it had taken him a lot of work to convince them that Vivian was telling the truth. She's not the sort of person to get involved with crime, knowing the risks. He managed to persuade the police to let her go, recording Vivian's statement. He and Oliver walked out of the station together. Tell me, Vivian, how long are you going to keep getting into this kind of trouble? We should have got yourself in such a mess. Firstly, you promised not to go digging in the dump, Oliver said. Well, I wasn't digging. I was just passing through. Sometimes winter's coming and I don't have anything. Kevin? So I thought I'd find something warm. I found this scooter. I thought I'd give it to the kids. But there's a stash. So what was I supposed to do? Throw that necklace away? And then, thanks to it, maybe someone will be found. But I didn't know, she tried to explain. Exactly, you didn't know. But you know you don't just hide expensive things and then throw them away. And you could have guessed, at least, and not run out to sell that pendant. Take it to the police at once and explain everything there. Write a statement, after all. Yes, the police are waiting for me, Vivian sighed, but what kind of woman is that? She's older than you, but just as smart and cautious. It's strange, I've seen all sorts. Life teaches you nothing. Oliver shook his head. But she was the daughter of rich people. And then she married a rich man, some businessman, and had a son. Her husband died in a car accident. So a young widow, a rich heiress with a small child, marries another, also not poor, but in my opinion, a suspicious type. They live together, and then she disappears to some unknown place. As her husband says, she went out of town to find a place for a holiday. And they wanted to have a holiday there in the summer. But she went alone for some reason and didn't come back. There's a swamp behind the forest. Well, the young husband stayed with the child he lives. We looked for her, of course. But if she disappeared in the swamp, where will you find her? Wow, what stories can happen? So maybe it was this husband who threw away the scooter and pendant? Vivian suggested. Quite possibly. Except someone put the pendant in the handle of the scooter. That's something you'd have to think of, and why. A perfectly good scooter to throw away, Oliver pondered aloud. And where did they live? Those rich people, Vivian asked. Why do you want to know? Please, Vivian, don't go where they don't ask you to go. I wasn't going to, I was just asking, said Vivian, with feigned indifference, who was quite taken with the story. Oliver did mention the address of a young widower with a child. Then he advised the girl to live quietly, and he would soon help her. It's no good you're hiding in an abandoned house. You'll have to find something. I'm already working in that direction, so sit tight for now and don't go anywhere. All right. I'm not going anywhere. I live in the same house you said, only I have a dog now. Polkan's name is Polkan. If I'm going to go somewhere else, I need a place where I can go with him. We'll think of something for you and Polkan. Just make sure you don't go anywhere. Vivian promised, not intending to fulfill her promise. The very next day she went to the address she had been given, and very quickly it became clear that yes, the owner of the house was the man who had thrown the toy away. But how could she get close to him and find out anything? The only way. She waited for him to come out of the gate and asked, "Hello, don't you have any work to do?" "What job?" muttered the man, eyeing the girl curiously and distrustfully. "Anything, I don't care. I can do a lot of things. I can cook, wash, clean, anything you say. And I don't charge much, because I need the money badly. You know what, I'd hire you as a janitor. Literally in the yard, in the garden to clean. There's quite a lot of work there, but I won't let you in the house. No use for that." He looked round at Vivian, suspiciously and disgruntled. "So you do your cleaning outside, but don't go any further along the hall. If you steal anything, look to me." The girl took offense at such an assumption, but kept silent. Still, she had her own plans, and it was necessary to fulfill them somehow, and for that she had to gain the confidence of the master himself, and of all the others living in the house. There weren't many of them. The owner himself and his son, and a maid, a middle-aged woman who had worked here a long time ago, under the previous owners, the parents of the missing woman. She seemed to be a talkative woman. Besides, they didn't get to chat very often. "Oh, honey, how did you end up in a place like this? Money is money, but you can't make any money here. He's greedy as hell. I'm going to leave." "I feel sorry for James, the boy. Is he really hurting him?" Vivian was horrified. She had seen the missing woman's young son before. A boy of about 5 years old, very sweet, but so sad. Well, how can I put it, hurts him. Not hitting, of course, God forbid. But he doesn't pay attention to him. He doesn't let anyone talk to him. They don't take him to kindergarten. The child sits in a cage. This is the kind of life Natalie arranged for her son. And she disappeared. Where could she have disappeared to? Vivian asked. Who knows? I sometimes think maybe she ran away altogether because she realized who she was messing with. I mean Michael, the husband, and more likely he ruined her in some way. But he won't confess, the bastard, and the police don't care. A woman goes missing. I don't think anyone's looking for her. They reckon she drowned in the swamp, but Michael doesn't grieve for his wife. He's got some girl coming to see him, probably wants to wait a year and marry someone else. What will happen to James then? Vivian didn't like this story anymore. She decided to talk to the boy somehow. Maybe at least he'll be able to find out about a scooter with a secret. The boy was also happy to talk to a new person, although his stepfather prevented any communication. But he was often away from home, and the girl managed to choose a moment. One day, when the boy was walking in the yard, Vivian came up to him and as if casually asked him if he had a scooter. I did, but Michael threw it away. He's not my dad. So why did he throw it away? I mean, you must have liked your scooter, right? Of course I liked it. Besides, it wasn't just an ordinary one. I did a few things to it. Michael is throwing it all away. What's left of Mum, so there's no memory. He threw her portraits out. And stuff, clothes, he took her away somewhere and I managed to hide her necklace and chain, wrapped it in a handkerchief and stuck it in the handle of my scooter. I thought he wouldn't find it there, but he just threw it away. And now there's nothing left at all." The baby's voice was shaking, tears in his eyes. Vivian felt so sorry for the child. She would take him home with her. But where was her home? She's living on her own with no housing rights. But the story of the scooter was getting more and more complicated. Clearly, Michael had something to do with his wife's disappearance. Meanwhile, Oliver, who decided to conduct his own investigation, found the missing Natalie. Turned out that she is alive, but hiding, afraid of her husband. He really wanted to kill her, threw her in the swamp, not thinking that she will be able to get out. And she got out, but a bad cold. It was early spring, very cold, and she got pneumonia. Couldn't have got home on her own. But fortunately, she was picked up by a gamekeeper living in the forest. He got her out, but she's afraid to go home, and even more so to speak out against her husband. She realizes that her son will be in danger. She herself has no defense, so she decided to stay in hiding, unable to think of a way out of the situation. Oliver took her away from the gamekeeper, brought her to the hospital for final recovery, and told her that she had nothing to fear now. She would be protected and could safely testify against her husband. "Easy for you to say," Natalie replied bitterly. "I'm afraid for my son and I don't trust anyone anymore. Besides, Michael, tried to make sure I was safe. He got all sorts of certificates that I'm not mentally healthy. I'm supposed to be hallucinating and having delusions and fantasies and all that. But in reality, of course, there's nothing like that. And let's clear all that up. You can make all the certificates you want, but you have to confirm them. There are doctors here. They will give a conclusion that you are a completely normal person." When he met Vivian again, Oliver told her that the boy's mother had been found. And soon, when all the evidence had been collected, her husband could be arrested. Vivian was overjoyed at this news and once again, meeting the boy, whispered to him, "Your mother is alive. Would you like me to take you to her?" The child was happy. Of course he wanted to. But the timing of this conversation was most inopportune for Vivian. Michael was at home and heard what she was saying. "Oh, you cunt. I thought you were a thief, and it turns out you're a spy," he shouted. "And you're a murderer, and you'll be in jail soon. I have connections in the police. I know all about you," the girl blurted out, and immediately fell down, receiving a severe blow on the head. An elderly maid who saw this called an ambulance. In all the commotion, no one noticed little James slip out of the property and run away. He was picked up by the police. The truth came out. Michael was arrested. Vivian was taken to hospital, but the blow was too strong. The girl slipped into a coma. And Natalie was happy. She was finally able to feel completely safe to go home, to hug her son, but she couldn't forget about the one who had helped her get her life back to normal. And Vivian, poor girl. "I'm the reason she got hurt," she told Oliver as the two of them visited the girl in the hospital. "I have to help her somehow, don't I? The doctors are helping Vivian right now and promise that she'll be fine. Her condition is mostly the result of shock," replied the policeman. "I have no doubt that she will soon be on her feet. But that's not what I mean at all. You have told me, after all, that she is living in some terrible conditions. Well, I think I ought to help her to get on with her life. After all, it was she who found my pendant. It's very dear to me. It was my grandmother's. Actually, I know my parents are foster parents, but they took me in from birth. So I think I'm their daughter and they thought so. It's all in your hands. I'm sure you can do it. Helping Vivian is absolutely necessary. I must be guilty in front of her. I knew it was hard and I didn't have time to do much about it. I didn't have time. Now I've started looking for a place in the hostel and I've almost arranged it. I don't think that will be necessary. I've offered Vivian a place to live with me, not as a servant, but just to live in my house, work, do whatever she wants, and then I'm sure she'll be able to make a life with her determination." Just at that minute, a nurse came out of Vivian's room, cheerfully reporting, "Your sleeping beauty is awake." "I don't know if she's awake or not yet." Natalie and Oliver entered the room. "Vivian, you win again," a guest said. "Just living. Waiting for you. Do you need anything?" Vivian asked with a smile. "Thank you. I don't need anything else yet, just really thirsty and hungry. She was on the mend quickly, and the story of what had happened to her and Natalie gained a lot of publicity and became public knowledge. They were even filmed and then shown on television. Then the unbelievable happened. Vivian's mother saw the program at the home for the disabled. She was terribly excited about it. She immediately started asking that both Natalie and Vivian be brought to her. Vivian was certainly glad of this. She herself had wanted to visit her mom for a long time, and Natalie had only gone for the company of her. She didn't see why she should go out with a strange woman. "I'll go for you," she told Vivian. "Maybe there's something you can do to help her." But what her mother told her was a complete surprise to both of them. "Girls, your sisters and I'm your mom. I realize you have nothing to love me for. I gave birth to you, Natalie, when I was very young at 17, and I lived without a mother myself. I only had a father, and he was ill, drinking heavily. Where was I going with a child? So I refused. So I left the maternity hospital with nothing. I left, but I couldn't calm down. My heart was aching. A week later, I ran to the same maternity hospital. I said, 'Give me back my baby.' And they said to me, 'It's too late. We've already adopted your little girl.' I cried, asking for the address so I could at least see her. And they said, 'No, that's all.' Then, as I was leaving, an elderly nurse stopped me. She lived next door and knew my family, and she said, 'I don't make things up. What will you give your girl?' Nothing but tears, and our rich family took her. She'll be like a cheese in butter there. Her father's a famous man, and you'll understand when you're older. And just be careful next time.' And she said her last name. I remembered it. I realized it was really best for my child. And then I see this report and I see the two of you, and I thought how life has turned out. I brought you two together anyway. So I'm sorry, Natalie, and ask Vivian what fate was like for her. I never got my life together, even though it took me 10 years to give birth to her. And Vivian, I'm sorry I couldn't provide for you." "Oh no. I've always wanted a sister. How I knew I had one. And I'm very glad we've met at last." And the girls hugged each other. "And not only a sister. I have a nephew now too. And you, Mum, have a grandson. I'm not offended either. I can't call you Mum though. I have a different mom, sorry, but thanks for your sister. We'll always be together now. We'll try to do something for you too. I'll talk to the doctors. Maybe we can transfer her to another clinic." The sisters left the house completely different. Now they knew that they had someone they could always count on. "What a pity I didn't know you before, and didn't know you were my sister. But at least a year earlier, then I wouldn't have needed Michael. We'd be together. I would have helped you," Natalie said. "Yeah, I'm sorry too. Even now I can't believe I have a sister. I can't believe I could be so happy, and I loved your James as soon as I saw him. I wanted to steal him away from Michael." Oliver visited them at home. He was a lonely man attached to the sisters, who had been through a lot of troubles but had found each other. They talked about what they had learnt recently, about how their lives would change. "I'm glad, very happy for you," Oliver smiled, "and especially for you, Vivian. What are you going to do next? I hope you won't get involved in any more crime stories." "Well, that's one thing I can't promise," the girl replied cheerfully. "No, the first thing I'll do is finish school myself. I was good at school before, so I don't think there'll be any trouble. And then I'll go to an institute." "You don't mean to be an artist, do you?" "Do you?" "No way. I'm going to go to law school. You said yourself that I have the ability." And they sat down to drink tea with a cake that the sisters had brought, discussing the story for a long time and making plans for the future. People are divided into larks and owls. Amanda wasn't divided into anything. She was 100% herself. Totally unique, polarized. Life molded her into a lark, made her get up at the crack of dawn. School, institute, work. She studied, worked, but every morning her only wish was not to get up, to lie down for another 3 hours. Her worst enemy was the alarm clock. It's ringing, the bastard. That's who I'd slap without regret at night. Better reading, thinking, working. Trying to go to bed early was a total disaster. Can't sleep. She gets almost hysterical because she can't sleep, and she has to get up soon. Mornings have never been good or wise for her. Getting up, taking a shower, eating breakfast all by force. Her husband says something. She doesn't have the energy to listen or respond. He's angry that he's being ignored. Amanda is losing her temper. How many times she asked him not to bother her in the morning, to let her wake up. By the time she got to work, she was awake. I'm good to go. You're lucky you have a job you love. If every morning was like hard labor, there'd be no life at all. My friend Barbara used to wail every time. I hate this job. When I think that it's a lifelong job, I feel bad. Imagine. They gather in the morning, and the first thing they do is assess who's wearing what. God forbid you stand out. They're going to whip you. Then they start complaining that they're overworked and try to take it out on each other. I try not to get involved with anyone. So all the work is dumped on me. And it's easier for me to work for everyone than to deal with these nerves. I drag myself to work in the morning and try to get out early in the evening. You wanted to change jobs, didn't you? Amanda asked. I did. But remember how I chose my profession? I didn't have any aspirations at all. I went where my mom said I should go. Turns out finance and accounting weren't my thing, but I have no other profession. No matter how many times I change, it's the same thing. You what? There's a lot of work, and I'm ready to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I envy you to the teeth, Barbara said. They say envy is destructive. I've already fallen to pieces, but envy never goes away. That's when Julian envied herself, as if she'd gotten a lucky ticket. If Barbara was pushed into the profession by her mother, Amanda took the path of least resistance. She dismissed medical, polytechnic, and law institutes at once. She wouldn't get in. There was a big competition. The pedagogical institute remained. The faculty also did not cause doubts. Philological, the only school subject that Amanda adored, literature. She would be a teacher of Russian language and literature. She studied easily and with interest. It seemed that she did everything right. After 6 months of working at the school, she began to doubt the correctness of her choice. It turned out that children in such large numbers irritate her intention to direct humanity and the person of students on the right path with the help of Russian classics. No one needs it. They do not read at all. All the good, eternal will not get. It was left to monotonously hammer in the rules of the Russian language and coach them to pass exams. No one pushed her into the profession. She chose it herself. And the result is the same as Barbara's. She kicks herself to work, and sadly thinks that life is boring and work is hateful. One day she got so angry at herself for putting up with it, and not even trying to change it, that she decided I should run away from school. Anywhere. It won't be worse. The opportunity came as soon as Amanda decided to change her life by all means. Apparently, fate was standing under the door and opened it as soon as Amanda slammed the previous one. Summer began. The school year ended. She got her vacation pay. Instead of joy, it was anxiety. I made a vow to myself. I'm not going back to school in August. I kept saying it to myself like a mantra. I'd get my resolve, get euphoric, a new life begins. Then I'd get this hopeless sadness. What new life? Who's waiting for you? What do you know? What can you do? She knows nothing but Russian. And with skills even worse, can't even teach. I could try to get a job as an administrator, but it's hardly a dream job. She wanted something interesting, creative, but nothing concrete came to mind. Amanda was angry with herself. She's a mess. She can't even decide what she wants. Dreaming, and in the fall go to school, and again will begin self-abuse and weeping over his worthless life. Get a grip, make at least one step. I did everything I have: correct speech, good diction, and a pleasant timbre. Where to with all that? Amanda decided that all that goodness could come in handy on the radio. She realized that there you also need a quick reaction, the ability to improvise. She hoped it was something she could learn. I went to the local TV and radio station and said, "I want to work for you." Weren't they surprised? Apparently, such broadcast stars often come to them. They took her to the studio, let her read the text, wrote it down, and sat her down in a corner to wait for the verdict. Amanda sat on pins and needles, howling with excitement. Turns out, reading a text into a microphone is really scary. What made you think she could? Probably embarrassed, stuttering, stammering. They will not take. A big fat man flew into the studio. Amanda was stunned. A local celebrity, TV star, journalist Dylan. "Gentlemen, For the love of God, help me out. Gentlemen, I need a female voice. I need a woman's voice now. We're having a real bad time with women. Roberta's in Moscow on a course. Miranda and Penelope are on vacation. We have to pass the program, and there's no one to sound it. William, do you have anyone at the moment? Dylan, you're married for the first time. You couldn't have done it beforehand, could you? I've got girlfriends who've gone to sea too. Michelle's on the air. Amanda will be here in about 3 hours. William was just listening to Amanda's tape, her voice sounding softly in the studio. Dylan was rushing around the cramped room, clutching at consoles, dropping chairs and knocking over microphones. Careful, elephant. You're going to blow up the whole studio. Shit, I'm burning. Who's that? Did you record it now? It's not bad. It's a good voice, but it's a little stiff. No experience at all. Give me the headphones. Dylan put the headphones on, listened. William, are you drunk? William, are you drunk? Pretty good. Where is she? Sitting down. She's here to apply for a job. Her name's Amanda. Dylan wasn't listening. He ripped off his headphones and ran over to Amanda. Radio, basically, or is television okay too? Amanda asked. If I don't like it, I'll go back to the radio. Dylan grabbed Amanda by the arm, dragged her along some passages and sat her in a chair in the television studio. He ran off, brought back a sheet of text. Read it, then we'll look at the picture. You'll memorize it. Which phrases on which video we'll try to sound out. Don't worry, it's not too hard, and your voice clearly overlaps with the theme. 2 days later, the program was edited. Amanda looked at the monitor and listened to her voice with amazement. Somehow it is not the same, changed, knows that hers, but sounds strange. What's up, beautiful? Congratulations on your debut. You did a great job on the montage, you made some good adjustments. Why don't you stay at the radio station? I don't have a journalism degree, Amanda admitted. Well, that's surprising. Half of our staff are self-taught with no specialized training teachers, engineers. I'm a geography teacher myself. Of the scientists here, there are 2 directors, cameramen, a few journalists. Thank God, at least we have licensed drivers. I'll tell you what. I've got a short story. We'll go, shoot it, come back. You write your story, I'll write mine. We'll see what happens. Let's go. There was an unspoken division into castes in the newsroom. The coolest were the court journalists, those who worked with the city in regional administration. Someone traveled to fields and firms. Someone told about science and education. There were specialists in crime, sports. Amanda was thrown into culture theaters, concerts, exhibitions, museums. Once she was shooting at a photo exhibition of the city's architectural monuments. Strange, very beautiful photos, unusual angles. The play of light and shadow turned old buildings into sunny palaces or haunted castles. Then the idea arose to make a series of programs about historical places of the city, mini-films with staging and costumes of different times. Julian's husband Henry was strongly opposed to his wife's work on television. Amanda, in high school you had rationing, schedules, weekends, vacations all summer. What about now? You just started working, you're never home. I don't like it. What do you want, fame? So much stardom on a provincial channel to talk about the premieres of the same provincial theater. Will you even get paid extra for tickets sold? Or are you going to distribute it yourself so they can see that your advertising is useful? Amanda always went along with her husband Henry. He's older, he's smart, he knows best. But this time she's on the fence about it. No, I'm not going back to school. I'm going to go mad in a couple years. Why do you need an angry, hysterical wife? Aren't you afraid of getting bit? I'm not home much. It's a good thing I'm sitting here like an owl. You don't come home much at night. I like the editorial office. It's interesting. I'm happy to go to work for once. Do you value your work more than your husband? Henry asked. I haven't dug that deep. But now that we're getting ultimatums, I'll think about it. Henry, we've been together 6 years. We're past our youthful maximalism. It's time to compromise, Amanda said. Julian was finally content no one to keep her awake at night and stand in front of 100 snide teenagers in the morning. Henry was often not home. And if he was, Amanda went to bed early. She made herself comfortable with her laptop, writing plans, programs, and stories, looking for material. At the TV company, the technical service, the broadcasting department, and the administration had a tight schedule, but the journalists were free to behave. What could be taken from them? Creative personalities can stay on set until midnight. They were obliged to show up for editorial meetings. The schedule of orders of cameramen, drivers, and editing studios must not be disrupted. Journalists on duty must be in place, and then compose and write when it is convenient, or when the muse has visited. But if the material is not aired in time, it will not be good. On Friday, Barbara called. "Amanda, are you at work? You're the only one who can save me. I'll be right there." Barbara's in trouble. She was stopped at a crosswalk. "I got hit from behind by a car. Now my car's in the shop. Can you believe this asshole's making excuses? I didn't know you'd slow down. I mean, it's a crosswalk. He's pushing the hell out of it." He's walking around. Barbara was angry, sparks flying from her eyes. "And it looks like a woman's driving, as you know." "And who is he?" "Well, it's all right. I didn't come here for this. Give me the car for tomorrow. At least I have to go to the cottage." Amanda ordered furniture movers. "Tomorrow's delivery. You're taking Henry on a business trip. You drive his car? I'll drive you home tonight." "Oh, please." "Come on, take it," Henry agreed. "If you need a car and movers, where are the menu schedules so they don't bump into each other?" "It's my policy not to mix lovers and movers," Amanda replied. "Don't tell me. Maybe you should make some of the movers your lovers. It's a win-win." Henry was going on a business trip to the Business and Investment Forum. It's good to be an up-and-coming investment manager. Production meetings are sometimes held in Turkey. Amanda wanted to go to Turkey too. She had flown with Henry once before, but this time he didn't invite her. Probably the firm is in economy mode. They fly without wives. Although if you save money, you don't have to fly anywhere. You can spend here. But it's none of their business. "Why are you flying on Saturday?" "The conference starts on Monday," Amanda asked. "Friends from the Institute are coming from Las Vegas and Chicago. We decided to fly in 2 days early to meet and socialize. We're not going to have time for that." "Hey, why don't we call a cab? You know what? We got to get to the airport early." "Never mind, I'll take you." "Oh, Henry, I didn't tell you. I'm using your car for now. I gave my car to Barbara for the weekend." The morning was as gloomy as ever. Maybe I should have been a hero for nothing, Amanda thought. Let him call a cab, but now it's too late. She volunteered to drive, so they'll go. Henry drove to the airport, and Amanda dozed in the passenger seat. Henry put on some music, looking cheerful and content. And Amanda wondered, where does a man get so much energy in the morning? Although if she were flying to Turkey, she would also radiate joy and optimism. She walked Henry to the departure area, kissed him, waved, got a glass of coffee from the machine, and went to the parking lot. I felt sad, not because her husband was leaving, but because she wasn't worried about it. Before, she would have sobbed for hours. What's it like to be separated like this? Now I'm ashamed to say it's a relief that he'll be gone for at least a week. Yeah, the family life had fallen apart. When did it go wrong? I don't know. Amanda sat in her car, drinking coffee, thinking about her and Henry's life. Suddenly she realized, sharp and clear, that there was no love. Who knows? He was smart, mature, 7 years older, reliable. Mom used to say you can't miss out on a fiancé like that. You have to take him before he's taken from under your nose, and Amanda didn't. She liked him. She seemed to love him. And she didn't know what it was like to love. Admiration? Hormones? Yes, love. It was only now that something snapped. It seemed that Barbara, with her endless affairs, was happier than a good wife. She couldn't wait for love and see the sky in diamonds. Didn't know how the mind was filled with feelings. Amanda suddenly realized she was crying. Why would she be crying? It's silly. She was fine. A husband who's the envy of the world. And she's in love. Even if without sparks and surges, but reliable, proven. That's yours, with fireworks and diamonds flashed and passed. But hers is forever, with no surprises. Amanda wiped her tears and drove home from the parking lot. It's cozy and peaceful there. The highway to the airport is almost empty. The road is gorgeous, the face of the city any way you look at it. The morning of a summer day is sunny and bright. The dreariness is gone, the mood skyrockets. Amanda rushes along the highway, smiling at the jokes of the hosts of the morning broadcast of her native TV and radio company. Amanda is distracted by some quiet sound, as if the phone is ringing, but somewhere far away she looks. Her phone is lying next to her and is silent. What's ringing? Pulling off, the highway stopped. It's gone. Looked around, looked in the back seat, opened the glove compartment. There it was, the phone. That's weird, Henry has two of them, probably a work phone for contacting clients. I was going to put it back where it belonged. I reached for the glove compartment, and the phone rang. My hand jerked in surprise, and the phone fell to the floor. Amanda fumbled under the seat, trying to find the phone, but it kept ringing. Penelope glowed on the screen. Should she answer it? I guess so. I should tell her Henry had flown out. Have them call in a week. I hit reply, but I didn't have time to say anything. Henry, are you on the plane yet? We're in Miami. I know you wanted to go to LA. But this is better, the hotel's fancy and the sea's clean. Aiden, are you going to talk to your dad? There was some noise and a child's voice in the distance. Daddy, come quick. I can't hear you at all. The connection's bad. I'll send you the name of the hotel. Kisses, my love. How did you land? Call me. The phone buzzed, and Amanda sat up. Her face went aghast, like a sack of sackcloth. What was that? Wrong number. No. The girl called Henry by name and is waiting for him in Miami. The call was from a Jane Doe Penelope. That's Henry. Amanda was still pretending not to understand. No, that can't be right. It was crazy. But through the mush in her head grew a fierce and firm conviction. Okay, you got it right. Penelope is Henry's mistress. He also has a child. Not a casual liaison, a long-term, you might say, familial relationship. How could it be? Years of lies and pretense. The thoughts weren't forming too clearly in Amanda's mind yet. It was all too sudden. Somehow she would have to think about it, evaluate it, and think and feel and decide how to go on living. But then, now emotions are running high, we have to live up to this then. Ah, enough sitting. It's time to go. The question was where? Amanda imagined how she would return to an empty apartment, unable to work. That's not what's on her mind. Will wander around the rooms and eat herself around the house, and draw pictures one scarier than the other. No. She can't be alone right now. There's no point in going to the editorial office. It's a day off, it's empty. The duty crew is somewhere on the set, and there are no close friends there to whom I can pour my heart out. That leaves Barbara. That's what a friend is for, so that all the troubles and misfortunes, snot and tears go to her. Barbara, are you at the cottage? Yeah, I'm on my way. Barbara didn't even ask why. If Amanda had suddenly gone to the cottage early in the morning, something must have happened. She sounded like she needed to heal her soul, and she needed a shoulder to cry on. By the time Amanda arrived, Barbara had been pacing at the gate for 20 minutes. She was anxious, and she couldn't sit still. She couldn't remember a time when her sensible, positive friend Julian had spoken in such a hushed voice and desperately sought help. She talks about work with enthusiasm and interest. It's all right there, so it's personal. That's what's weird. Julian has an exemplary husband, framed and on the board of honor. In Barbara's opinion, boring, she wouldn't even notice. Well, Amanda's husband suits her. She begged Barbara, how could they not fight once in 6 years? It's all very civil and intellectual. Maybe that's it? In the Urals, they would have once allowed themselves a couple of unparliamentary phrases at each other. They would have pounded the plates a little bit, and then it would have been easier. No, nothing could have happened between Amanda and Henry. It's too unbelievable. Well, don't fantasize. She'll tell us when she gets here. Amanda's confused face added to the anxiety. Something out of the ordinary happened. She dragged her friend out to the veranda, sat her down on the sofa, patted her like a dying person water. And some crazy, surprised eyes, she seemed to see something, but she didn't understand what it was. What's wrong with her? Aliens came and took Henry away. It's no big deal. They'll see it's of no interest whatsoever. Will they give it back? Barbara, stop bouncing around. Sit down. I don't know how to say this, but, Henry has a second family. Barbara plopped down in the chair. Now she had a face like she'd seen an alien. That's out of the realm of possibility. What, is the girlfriend crazy or something? I can't believe this. Amanda, what makes you think that? Did you dream it? I heard his Penelope. Amanda told me everything that had happened since that unfortunate morning. You think I misunderstood? Wake up. Say something censorious. How much did you say? A boy. 4 years old. Do you know what that means? If it was a casual relationship, well, there's nothing in life. Love. A baby. But they didn't get married. It didn't work out. If it's a baby. Family life is tiring. He's a whore. He's a bitch. Dad married you and then started a second family. All the years you shared him with Penelope. God, what an abomination. How sensitive and caring. Not a word, not a deed. As long as not to upset you. I wonder Penelope also not upset lives, and you do not know. Or only protects you. Probably loves more. Barbara, with her intolerance for lies, her inability to pretend, would have leveled Henry. She'd call him right now and tell him what he is. But that's Barbara. She doesn't keep men around long because the hint of insincerity is a mortal sin. Reason for the breakup. What will Amanda, who has lived with one man for so many years, who considers family to be the most important value? Barbara couldn't predict. Julian cried, not sobbing, unable to nose. Silently she sat with a frozen face, tears pouring down her cheeks. Not from anger and despair, from resentment and frustration. It turns out that all the years I had been proud of the family I didn't have, and loved a husband who wasn't mine. Why did he do this to me? For love and loyalty. I understand if he fell in love, floundered, suffered and left. But no, sneaky. In cold blood for years. What are you going to do? Divorce. Well, thank God. I was afraid you'd start talking about family values, about years lived in love, about forgiveness and repentance. And divorce is the right thing to do. It's not scary. It's scary to live and wonder, did he come from that wife now? Or is there a couple more? Oh shit, the Padishah's harem. A horn sounded at the gate. The car doors slammed. The furniture's here. Stop crying. Come on, let's get busy. Then we'll sit down, cry, think. Two smart women will always find the right solution. And we're smart, even though we're pretty. You have nothing to do at home, you'll stay here. That wasn't a question. The movers, aka assemblers, turned out to be with 3 young men, quickly dragged a pile of wooden parts into the house and began to make a closet and shelves out of them. At the gate again there was a sound, cars approaching. There was a knock on the gate. The owners. Do you have pickers working for you? At the gate stood a man in his 30s, black, with black hair and eyes. Just like Richard Gere in his youth, only taller. Barbara, having jumped out of the cottage, at once appreciated such a handsome man. She stopped, put on her most charming smile and swam to the gate. Who are you? Liam, head of delivery. So you have my students here. Come in, Liam. That's how you do it. Department heads rush in to help. Amanda had forgotten to suffer. Barbara was so blatantly flirting with Liam. Apparently Barbara's personal relationships were easy, and here she was with someone so young and handsome. It's embarrassing. She's sitting there suffering, and she didn't ask how her friend was doing. Well, nothing. Now the furniture and drawers will be sorted out. She will definitely inquire. Although looking at the active Liam, it was doubtful that they'd sort it out quickly. We've got some student guys working weekends. I gave them an order yesterday. I allowed them not to come to the office after the work was done. I'm going to my country house anyway. Why bother? My summer house is 3 streets away. That's lucky. His summer house is right next door. Barbara's going to find out if he's married. And if he's not, there's no way he's getting out of Barbara's arms. Anyway, Amanda doesn't know anyone who has. Finally, the furniture is packed up. The deed is signed. The students are gone. Liam, like Carlson, flew away, but promised to return tonight. Amanda, you and I have a zebra-striped life. It's like a zebra-striped zebra. I think this zebra's trying to trample me. I don't think it's strong enough. You think you're going through a black streak, your family life is ruined, darkness ahead. It seems to me you have a white streak, began a new job found, husband, bigamist kicked to the exit. You're on your way. Maybe you're right. I lived my life thinking how lucky I was, what a wonderful husband I got. Some people's love is brighter, but my happiness was stronger. I was walking on the black line, not across it. When it's black, then white, but along with the stubbornness of a donkey, I've been moving along. You know what it takes to be happy, to live with someone who appreciates you. And if your husband turns out to be a scoundrel, divorce without regret, and have a lover. You're almost done with the first one. Now you're down to the second. You're lucky to have a friend who's good at that. A girl of about 10 ran into the gate. Aunt Barbara. Mom said to tell you that the bathhouse will be flooded by evening, and the Smith family soaked the kebab. We're having a gathering tonight, she turned and ran off. Amanda, that's how it works here. Saturdays are country club Saturdays. Mourning for family life is postponed. They don't let anyone languish here for long. Let's see what's in the fridge. Let's do our part in the feast. By evening, the tempting smells of heated baths and kebabs wafted through the village. My mistake, Amanda. Saturday night at the cottage is a special, sacred time. Rest is a sacred thing, even for those who didn't come to rest. They stopped digging, weeding, and building. And with a sense of accomplished duty, they set tables on verandas, in gazebos, or right in the garden, under apple and pear trees. Companies turn out to be motley and unpredictable. Someone came with friends, someone has relatives at the dacha instead of the owners. No matter, all acquaintances are not the first year, and although they meet rarely, sincerely welcome each other. Neighbors with their daughter Johnson's shashlik, Barbara with Amanda, and flew in, as promised. Liam sat up almost until morning. What's the beauty of country life? No one's in a hurry. You can sit at the table for hours with breaks for trips to the bath. You can long, taking your time, spit on the cooling samovar, and then even longer to drink unusually delicious tea. It might be ordinary tea, but at the dacha, under the starry sky, after the bath with smoke tastier than from an electric kettle. Amanda thought as she fell asleep, should she call Henry and answer the phone? If she answered, she'd have to explain herself over the phone. I'd hate that. When he got there, we'd talk. Amanda thought about what she was going to say. It kept coming out as nonsense. She couldn't imagine how she could talk about such things. Somehow she felt ashamed, as if it were her fault that her family was falling apart. She was angry that she couldn't find the words to tell her husband about his own meanness. And he's out there at sea, having fun. No remorse. I wonder if he was going to hide his second family. All his life he would take his child to school, take him on vacation, teach, marry, raise grandchildren? Come on, he's fine with it. But her Penelope is not all satisfied. How can she share the father of her child with another woman? We're getting confused ourselves. It's Henry's wedding, it's the program's shooting schedule, and then it's Barbara. It just doesn't seem right. But Amanda knows she's the one smiling sadly and shaking her head reproachfully. That's right. For the whole day, never found time for a heart-to-heart talk, never asked about her friend's personal life. Even in my sleep, I felt ashamed. I woke Amanda. The sun was beating down on her pillow. Barbara was on the veranda talking on the phone. Amanda got up, stretched, feeling good and at peace with herself, and went out onto the veranda. You awake? Liam and I are going to the river. Do you want to come? No. Are you having an affair? I'm going to step in. Well, you said you'd think about who you are. And who is this country macho? I'm going home for breakfast. I'm going to work tomorrow. You go to work. And I get a week's hard labor. Amanda, please just call me and let me know what's going on. I'm worried. Okay, bye. I'll probably get the car back tomorrow. Not the Echo, the macho one. Take a look. He's a good guy. All week Amanda worried, held on, could not work quietly, almost did not sleep. The decision's been made. It's not spontaneous, it's deliberate. It's a bit of a heartbreak. It is not easy to break the established, quite comfortable life. Would it be possible to build a new one? Henry called several times, but Amanda didn't pick up the phone. She had no idea what to say to him. As luck would have it, it had been a busy week. There was an international forum in town. There was a lot of filming. It was impossible to get into the schedule of the cameraman. Dylan persuaded Julian, your cultural and historical performance is a little bypass. The international fuss will be over. Let's get back to eternal values. I'll give you 2 cameramen. I give you my word. In the meantime, idleness. We could argue who is more valuable to Mother History. But they won't give you operators anyway. Not to be idle, Amanda decided to look at some old buildings. Maybe an idea would come to mind? In the old part of the city, on the outskirts, on the steep bank of the river, stood the former Ludwig Manor. In Soviet times, the estate housed a distillery. Then the factory moved to new workshops, and the manor house became useless and slowly crumbled. When Amanda arrived there, she realized why the building wasn't even listed as a monument. There was no monument, no floor or ceiling. Collapsed staircases and dilapidated walls. The vodka factory didn't feel sorry for the estate. The equipment was taken out through a break in the walls. The place was beautiful, a high bank, a river, a forest behind the river. Quiet. It didn't seem to be in the city, it smelled of honeyed herbs. Amanda saw a plan for the development of the town. Soon there would be cottages here, no old walls left. It was as if the brilliant Ludwig had never lived here. In the complete silence, Amanda heard some sound. It was unclear what, but she was not alone here. She listened. A dog, whimpering, walked toward the sound. No, it wasn't a dog. It was crying. The crying seemed to be louder at the far end of the building, where the catacombs just began. Amanda couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Who's in here? Where are you? A choked cry came from somewhere below. Amanda walked cautiously over the rotten boards piled on the ground. At one point, the boards formed a 2-meter-long breach, and underneath was a hole 2 meters deep. Amanda lay down on the boards, crawled over. At the bottom of the hole sat a boy about 7 or 8 years old. Can you stand up? No, I broke my leg. Amanda remembered seeing a makeshift ladder by the entrance, a board with cross bars. She fetched the ladder, lowered it into the hole, and climbed down. The boy was dirty, scared. He looked up at Amanda with pleading eyes, clinging to her neck. Only tight. Come on. Amanda climbed up, clinging to the rungs, splinters digging into her palms. She prayed the old and rotten ladder wouldn't fall apart. Amanda crawled out of the hole, put the boy on the boards, and collapsed beside him. I need to catch my breath, the boy said. My cell phone flew off when I fell. I need to call my dad. Amanda looked around. Yeah, there he was. Let's get to the car and call him there. Can you walk? I couldn't walk very well. My leg was really broken. They made it to the car. In the boy's cell phone, Amanda found his father's cell phone number. Dad. Austin. Where are you? An excited voice called out. I'm taking your son to the pediatric trauma center. Don't be alarmed, it's just a broken leg. Here, go there. The trauma center took x-rays. It's nothing serious. It's a non-displaced fracture, the doctors said, and took Austin away to get a cast. Amanda sat in the hallway, unable to leave. What if Daddy got carried away? An excited man was running down the hall. Here comes Daddy, Amanda thought. Did you find Austin? Sit down, they're putting a cast on him. Why don't you give him a minute? I think I'm gonna go. Where did you find him? Ludwig Manor? Where is that? What was he doing there? Ask him. Why do you leave your child alone in the ruins? It could have been worse. Richard was in the office when Austin Harper's nanny called to say the boy was missing. They were walking in the park, and suddenly Austin was missing. Harper circled the park, calling, but he was nowhere to be found. Richard drove around to every place his son could be, but he couldn't find him. When Amanda called, he was filing a police report. Austin was brought out of the treatment room with a cast on his leg. Richard rushed to him, grabbed him in his arms, held him tightly. Austin sobbed. Daddy, don't scold Harper. It's my fault. I snuck out on purpose. I thought I'd see the old house and come back. It wasn't her fault. I know it's not her fault. Only now she's lying there with blood pressure. The doctors are giving her shots. You got a broken leg as punishment for your shenanigans. Why would she do that? Richard put Austin in a chair and ran after Amanda, who was leaving. Young lady, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't even thank you. It's just so crazy. My name is Richard. Here, take my card. I'd be glad if I could help you someday, Richard said. Would you mind giving me your cell phone number? Don't think anything of the sort. After today's adventure, I'm not thinking straight. I'm Amanda, and I won't give you my phone number, she said. Have a good day. Feel better, Austin. Tired, dirty Amanda drove home. Only now she was afraid. If she hadn't gone to the manor, what would have happened to the boy? The place is remote. Hardly anyone else would have come. A good boy would have rushed to his nanny's defense. And his father must be a good man, too. Anyway, his son loves him. The week flew by. Henry's coming back today. We're ready to meet and talk, but our hands are shaking with excitement. Amanda walked around the apartment, moving things from place to place, accidentally knocked over a vase of flowers, dropped a cup of coffee. She couldn't calm down. I wish he hadn't come. Gone forever. Then there would be no one to explain to. The key turned in the door. Amanda flinched, and suddenly a wave of rage swept over her. She'd been saving up for a week, and now she was on top of it. "You bastard, you're here," she exclaimed. Amanda took a deep breath, trying to calm down. No yelling. Henry didn't need to know what was going on inside. A smiling Henry walked in, tired but happy to be home. He was always so happy to be home from business trips. Only now Amanda was looking at him with different eyes. The look was insincere, the smile fake. He walked over and hugged her, showing his joy at coming home. "Amanda, I missed you so much." "I haven't," Amanda replied. "I wondered how long you were going to hang around like a pond. When are you going to make it to shore?" Henry froze. "Well, let's not get carried away. I know about Penelope Aiden. Why didn't you tell me for so many years?" "I didn't know how to tell you." "Well, you could gesture." "You thought I'd never find out? Hiding it from me was a problem? Living with 2 families? No problem?" "I didn't see it coming." "How? That you'll cheat from the day you get married? That the 2 families will live in parallel? Or that I'd find out? Of course you didn't think." "You can't think or feel," Amanda continued. "There's no other way to explain your life. I'm not exaggerating. I love you. Why should I love you? Do you love Penelope? Why didn't you go to her and the child? You, Henry, are a lousy husband and a lousy lover. I'm divorcing you. I don't care who you live with or where you live." Henry was pacing around the room. He'd never thought about life that way. Where had he miscalculated? How did Amanda know? He looked at her in bewilderment. "What divorce? I don't need a divorce." "Well, she found out she was hurt. Why get a divorce?" "Why don't you say something? This is about our common husband. We're talking about serious things. Divorce, Henry. 6 years of marriage doesn't count. We had a good life. You were fine with it. If I hadn't found out by accident, we would have moved on. I'm not a stupid woman, so why break it up? I'm not going to go back to that family. Let everything remain as it is. Penelope does not insist." "I don't care about your Penelope. I insist. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Let it remain as it is? I'm not satisfied as it is. I don't know how to live like this." Henry thought the only thing he was guilty of was hiding it badly. He didn't realize he didn't know his wife at all. So much the better. She wouldn't have to worry about the divorce. Only regret the years wasted on a man with no conscience and no feelings. "When you come to get your things, I'll file for divorce myself. I think it'll be a quick divorce. There's nothing to split, no kids." Henry wanted to say something, but didn't dare. The look in his wife's eyes was too fierce. He left. Amanda shook again. The tension finally released. It's done. Nothing more to wait for. There was no pity for past love. It was as if vaporized at once from squeamishness. There was no longing or bewilderment left on her heart. The international event was over, and Dylan had fulfilled his promise. Amanda owned 2 cameramen, shot a lot of material, and sat in the editing room all day long, reviewing, selecting. After a day like that, she was exhausted. She decided she wouldn't work on weekends. Not even at home. Maybe we should go to Barbara's. She's been missing. Amanda must have a crush on Liam. She thought about poor Austin a lot. How's his leg? Whether it was proper to call Richard and ask about her son's health or not, she twirled her business card in her hands. Wow, vice president of some publicly traded company. He's cool. And he didn't take care of the kid. It's a common thing. We build our careers and don't care about our families. Still, Amanda decided to call. Richard, it's Amanda. I'm worried about Austin. Amanda, I'm so glad. Austin beat me up. Why didn't I take your phone? He really wants to see you. I'm sorry, I know this seems weird, but could you meet him? He can't get over the horror of the pit. Maybe your presence will calm him down. Please don't say no. I'll pick you up wherever you say. Okay, in an hour. I'll give you the address. Richard's house smelled of freshness, flowers, and pies. Austin, on his crutches, hopped around the house, chattering away. He didn't look like a worried child, but he was genuinely happy for Amanda. Daddy. Amanda was dragging me up the stairs, and I was so scared. I was afraid I'd fall again. She's brave, Austin called Nanny Harper. Amanda was being painted by a young girl. It turned out Harper was a woman in her 50s, short, chubby, cozy. Her pies smelled of the house. Lunch was delicious. But Austin's mom wasn't at the table. Amanda didn't ask none of her business. Amanda, when my cast comes off, Daddy and I are going boating. Are you coming with us? I think the young man has a crush on you. Don't say no, it's beautiful out there. Amanda was embarrassed. She'd never been in a big house with servants, and it had been a long time since she'd been genuinely interested in herself. Austin stayed close to her, talking about school, friends, hobbies. Richard smiled and tried not to interfere. When Richard was driving Amanda home, he suddenly stopped the car and said, "Thank you. I haven't seen Austin like this in a long time. Probably not since his wife left." "Richard, I saw a picture of your wife in Austin's room. Where is it?" "I'm sorry, none of my business," Richard said. "I'll tell you. But I have a condition, 2 conditions. 1, we're going for coffee in that cafe over there. 2, we're going to be on a first-name basis. It's uncomfortable to talk about personal things to someone you're on a first-name basis with." Richard didn't marry out of passion or calculation, but out of love. A pure and sincere girl, affectionate and sweet. She was from a family of little wealth. Richard liked to spoil her with gifts and trips abroad. That's probably what did her in. She decided that everyone owed her just because she was so good. One day when Austin was 3, Richard came home and found a note, "I'm gone. Beg or no, Austin will be raised. I'm not coming back. I have a new life." When Richard drew up the divorce, learned that she lives in Paris, no contact with anyone, ran away, abandoned the child, never once called, and he cried and waited for his mother. Richard worked a lot, tried to be with his son more often, but time was disastrously short. Harper became a mother, grandmother, and savior. So Austin could not ask, could not blame Harper. It never occurred to Richard. She was the guardian angel of his small family. A year ago, it seemed to Richard that there was a girl in his life with whom he could be happy. Richard had no illusions, realizing that Frances was more interested in his status and position than he was in himself. It suited him. He himself did not burn with passion. Frances was beautiful, intelligent, quite consistent with the title of vice president's girlfriend. She treated Austin well. Maybe not very warm-hearted, but understanding. True, Austin couldn't stand Frances. If she sat down at the table, he refused to eat. When she came in, he'd shut himself in his room, give one-word answers and smile. He showed her he was not welcome. Richard thought his son was jealous. He thought it would work out in time. Frances thought so too. She said she'd do anything to make Austin accept her. Frances and Austin were home alone. Richard was at work. Harper had gone to the market. Frances burst into Austen's room. She had a dress and paint in her hands. "Did you accidentally do that?" she asked. "What are you lying about? You say nasty things to me everywhere you can. You little bastard. It's okay, I'll get rid of you. Your father will send you to boarding school. I'll do my best. Your mother abandoned you, and rightly so." The door opened and Richard came in. "Get out," he shouted. "Richard, I'm leaving," Frances replied. Richard wondered how he could have gotten involved with such a lying, cruel woman. She'd fallen for her beauty, her ostentatious intelligence. Richard made no further attempts at a private life. His son's peace of mind was more important. "That's my private life," he sighed. "It's not much, but it's substantial. You know, I don't think Frances Austen would accept any woman in the house after that. And he met you today." Indeed, Richard and Austen slipped into Amanda's life. The meetings were infrequent, but there was a warm, pleasant feeling that they were close to each other. They might be friends for now, but things were moving towards something more. The cast on Austen's leg was removed. The long-awaited boat ride on the lake took place. The lake was indeed beautiful. After the boat and ice cream, Austen rushed to the amusement park. While he experienced all the rides in a row, he was clearly not dizzy. Amanda and Richard wandered through the alleys of the park. "Amanda, it's my father's anniversary in a week," Richard said. "I'm asking you to come with me. I know it's a strange request. I'll try to explain. And then you can decide." Richard's father, Walter, was an important figure, the owner of several engineering plants in the region, and more. Now he was opening a branch in his hometown. He put two young and promising managers at the head of the new plant, Richard's son and son-in-law Simon. Between the young men there was a struggle for Walter's trust. The relatives had radically different views on the development of production. Each tried to prove that his project was more promising. But Simon had one strong advantage: he was long and firmly married to Richard's sister. And for Walter, a strong family was synonymous with stability. Richard had married badly, left a child without a mother, and had never been able to organize his personal life. If a man can't get his life in order, he is unlikely to be able to run a factory. Richard just happened to have Frances, a relationship of sorts, and in an attempt to improve his reputation, he told his father he was getting married. He and Frances had been separated for a long time, and now Walter demanded that Richard finally introduce his chosen one. "I want to see who my grandson will live with," he said. Walter had loved his late wife very much. He never remarried and never took off his wedding ring. Richard could not come to the anniversary alone, not so much for career reasons, although that too, but for fear of upsetting his father. Walter is very excited at the thought of his not-so-happy son having a family. "Amanda, play the part of my girlfriend, please." "Just for 2 days," Richard asked. "My father would stop lecturing me about the benefits of family life. Stop worrying about Austen's future, see that I could be trusted, and finally approve my project. It's actually better than Simon's. I know it sounds crazy, but please help me." "No, Richard, it's stupid," Amanda said. "How will you explain where the bride is gone?" "I'll think about it later. Now, if I come alone, my father will be disappointed, thinking I've deceived him and I'm no good for anything. You don't have to do anything. You're just coming to visit for 2 days to relax, have fun." "I can imagine the fun." "No, Richard, it's a really stupid idea. Think about it. There's still time." Amanda thought if she could just go with Richard to visit, even to his father's house, she'd be willing to play the bride, to pretend, to deceive. No, it was impossible. She was so worried, so anxious to help Richard. And so she did. And to confirm her doubts, or perhaps to remove them, she called Barbara. Barbara, as always, had her own opinion. "You should go. What if you guys have a little thing going on over there?" "What's going to get twisted?" Amanda wondered. "What are you implying?" "Oh, come on, I don't see it. We're adults, so why pretend? You can be friends with Austen. You can't be friends with Richard. Julian's no dumber. It's a great opportunity." "Make sure you go," Barbara said. Yeah, the girlfriend helped. Amanda had even more doubts. On Friday, Richard called. "Amanda, have you decided something?" he asked. Austin's voice could be heard in the phone. "Dad, give me the phone." "Amanda, will you come with us? Daddy's very upset." "Well, be his fiancée, even if it's just a pretend one." And Amanda gave in. "Okay, I'll do it." Walter's country home was impressive, a bright, huge palace. A maid greeted them at the entrance. "Richard, they're waiting for you in the parlor," she said. "I'll take your things to your rooms." Amanda was surprised that the house was empty. "Where are the guests?" she asked. It turned out the reception was tomorrow. Tonight was a quiet family dinner. Just her father, Roberta's sister, and her husband Simon, Richard, Amanda, and the children. "Dad didn't ask the bride much, didn't ask where she worked," Richard said. "But then there was Frances. I said that she writes poetry and plays tennis. Well done. Poems then okay, if I read some nonsense. They'll just think that the girl thinks she's a poet. But she's got no talent. But with tennis is worse, never held a racket in her hands. So try not to have any tennis tournaments here. You guys have a court, right?" At the head of a large oval table sat a tall, gray-haired man, Walter. On one side of the table sat a woman with a thin, nervous face, Roberta. A man with a poisoned, tense look, Simon. A teenage girl and a boy of about 10. The other half of the table was vacant, apparently for Richard and his family. Amanda was worried it was all a bit too pathetic. It was like a great nobleman and his staff. Walter stood up and walked over to Richard, Amanda, and Austin standing in the doorway. "Hello, Richard," he said. "I'm glad you finally brought your bride. What are your names?" "Amanda," she replied. "Meet Amanda. My daughter Roberta's family. Welcome to the family." So much for family, Amanda thought. Roberta was not welcoming them with open arms. "The girl must be a rich hunter," she said to Simon. "Richard would have an affair in a heartbeat. He's not picky, brother. He'll marry to spite her, just to get Simon's project away from her," Roberta said. "But it won't work. We'll fight." The dinner was of the highest order, with a change of dishes and wines. Roberta was always making sure the children behaved properly, constantly reprimanding them. No one brought up Austin. He ate not what he was supposed to eat, but what he wanted. He especially liked the cake. Roberta, the son, ate a piece and reached for the second. "Austin, have you had enough?" she asked. Austin glanced fearfully at his mother and pulled his hand away. But then he gave Amanda a sly look. "Amanda, can I have another piece?" "Sure, let me put it in," she replied. Austin seemed to dislike Roberta and their children. In any case, there was no kinship. Walter watched the family wars with a grin. He had a renewed desire to show Simon's importance, despite his mediocrity. Richard's inability to assert himself was frustrating. It had long been clear that his project was better. The only good news was that Richard would finally get married. "I wanted my son to be happy. I'm relieved for Austin. He seems to like his dad's choice. I guess the kids can go out and play." "We'll talk more," Walter said. "Do you know how hard I worked to build my empire? I'd hate to see it fall apart after me. Simon, you know what I mean. Tell you what, successor. This project is your test of independence. You have a problem with decision-making? Roberta's been driving you crazy. She decides what you do and when you do it. Roberta, would you stop raising him? He's growing up." "Richard, according to the latest report, the rolling mills are stalled. They put the mill's equipment in there. We need to modernize. What are you suggesting? You can't fix your own life." "I'm sorry, Amanda. I didn't mean you," Walter said to her. "What the hell are they doing? It's like a meeting of irreconcilable relatives or a production meeting. Interesting family," Amanda thought. Walter is tough and straightforward. Richard is soft and non-confrontational. Roberta's the one who's a fan of underhanded intrigue. Something tells me she doesn't like me. Is she going to do something nasty? All right, one more night, one more day. Another surprise. Amanda and Richard were put in the same room. "No putting the bride and groom in separate bedrooms," Roberta said. "How are we going to sleep?" I didn't think about it, Richard replied. Somehow I'm not ready for the wedding night. You're not? I've been looking forward to it. That's why you came, Amanda grinned. Stay off the bed. I can't fit on the chair, I'm curled up here. Amanda changed her clothes, opened the closet door, changed her clothes behind it, and ducked under the blanket. All right, turn on the light, she said to Richard. Strangely enough, she fell asleep almost immediately. Probably too many impressions. In the morning, when she lifted her head from the pillow, she saw Richard on the floor on the mat. It's a little small for a chair, Amanda said. Richard, get up. There's going to be a lot of guests tonight. I'm afraid I'll say something, he said. The main thing is that my father believed him. How will you explain yourself later? We had a fight, Amanda shrugged. And if Walter found out I wasn't my real fiancé, what would happen to you? He'd never be able to trust you again. There was a rustle outside the door. The door opened. Austin came in. Uncle Richard, Mom said to tell you that breakfast is in 15 minutes. The door slammed shut. So Roberta and her son came up, Richard whispered. He must have heard the conversation and seen the bed on the floor. I wonder if they'll give me breakfast or throw me out of the house right now. Amanda and Richard came down the stairs, and Walter stood at the bottom like a messenger of fate. Everybody in my office. Get Austin. Everyone in the office stood at attention. And Walter, do you keep track of the household? Richard asked. Roberta, what did you want to say? Dad, they're lying to you, she blurted out. Amanda is not a fiancée at all, just a fake girl. Richard made the whole thing up to further his project. You don't trust Simon? These guys are playing you for a fool. They're not even sleeping together. How do you know that? Walter wondered. I held a candle to it, Roberta said. Richard is your brother. Why are you snacking on him like that? Are you hoping you'll kick him out and put your sycophant as director? You don't know me well enough to think I can mix personal and business. And who Amanda is, we'll figure it out. Dad, I won't let you hurt Amanda, Richard said. Dylan, shut up. Austin, tell me, grandson, who is Amanda? No one yet. But Daddy gave her a ring and said they're getting married soon, the boy answered. Squad, of course, Walter added. I love her very much. I want her to live with us. That's the end of the conflict. Get ready to greet your guests. Don't forget it's my anniversary. Amanda, in her simple dress, felt awkward around the ladies in their evening gowns. Roberta, who'd been giving Amanda the evil eye all evening, added to her nervousness. At the height of the evening, when Walter was excited from congratulations and drinks, Roberta whispered to him. Papa, since he's not getting married, how about we surprise him? Take over the wedding. At last, a sensible suggestion. Walter exclaimed. He took a glass of champagne and turned to the guests. Gentlemen, I have a toast. My son Richard is getting married. The guests clapped and reached out to Richard with congratulations. And Walter continued. I'm taking charge of the wedding. Richard jerked to say something, but his father wouldn't let him. I don't mind. It's my decision, lovebirds. How are you going to get out of this? Amanda whispered in Richard's ear. What the hell kind of wedding is that? I'll think of something, he replied. What will you think of, thinker? Let's tell him right now. It would only make it worse, Amanda objected. Don't do it in front of everyone. We'll leave now and that's it. It's none of your business anymore. From now on, I made the mess, and I'll clean it up myself. We drove in silence. What was there to talk about? Amanda thought the whole thing had been bullshit from the start. How could she have agreed to it? Thank you, Barbara. Now she'll lose Richard and Austin. She won't be able to communicate with them like she used to, easy and friendly. Richard thought the best solution was to stop pretending and have a wedding. We can do it without a wedding. Why bother Dad? We could just sign the papers and not have to sign as long as Amanda's around. Too bad Amanda couldn't hear his thoughts. Austin wasn't thinking about anything. Sleeping. It had been a delightful day. Now we've got to get back to normal. Filming, texts, test screenings. Nothing was working. I couldn't get Barbara's ambiguous situation out of my head, and she wouldn't call on principal. Would they advise her again? She wanted to call Richard, but it was awkward. There was a reticence between them, an embarrassment. I knew it was over. In the evening, when Amanda was trying to concentrate on the text, but it wouldn't write, the doorbell rang. A tall, pretty blonde stood on the doorstep. "Amanda, we need to talk," she said. "I'm Penelope." Amanda was surprised, but let her in. "Come into the kitchen," she invited. "Amanda, I understand you're upset," Penelope began. "Henry left. You realize he's not coming back. Give him a divorce. We have a son." Amanda stopped understanding. "I filed for a divorce a long time ago," she said. "I could have gotten a divorce in 3 days. But Henry wouldn't budge. I had to go through the courts. But they'd been divorced a long time. So he didn't tell Penelope. He decided to keep her as his backup wife. Well, how to explain to her that he will marry 5 more times, and she will still be waiting for him to divorce? "Penelope, my words may offend you now, but chase this lying man out of your life," Amanda advised. "You and I wasted a lot of years on a worthless man. I didn't know you. Apparently you knew about me. Use your mind. He won't change. Let him go." "What the hell?" Amanda exclaimed. She ran into the room, grabbed her passport, and shoved it under Penelope's nose. "Here, look, a divorce stamp." Penelope stared with mad eyes. "Here, damn it." Still as women to calm down, Amanda got angry. "Penelope, come to your senses. You, I know, love him. I also loved. I could not think that I share him with another. Get him in the neck, he will still marry. And you'll wait and be a second wife forever. To spare. That's harsh, but true. As soon as you kick him out, a worthy man will appear. This is from personal experience." Penelope stood up and quietly wandered to the exit. I wonder if she had heard anything Amanda had said. She turned around at the threshold, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," Amanda said. "I'm sorry. Here's more proof that I did the right thing. Henry won't change. I wouldn't find out by accident. Penelope would live another 10 years, then I'd have to ration the wives. To hell with it. Richard's not calling. That's the problem. Barbara persuaded me. Call him yourself." "No, the fake fiancé part was over, so let him do it himself," Amanda replied. Although she missed both Richard and Austin, she was used to having them in her life. It seemed as if they would be. Barbara teased. "May, are you in love? Don't you dream about him at night?" Amanda was tired of waiting, dreaming and hoping. She thought she had a special relationship with Richard, but it didn't. Well, that's fine. There's work, there's Barbara. I'll live. Richard didn't call. He just showed up. "Amanda, I told my dad everything," he began. "How you saved Austin, how I talked you into playing the bride. He wasn't mad at you, of course, but at Roberta and me, at Roberta for her evil setups, at me for my stupidity and indecision." Walter immediately recognized Richard in Amanda's game. A man with a keen eye and a shrewd mind. Others don't run a business. Realized that Richard had not brought a bride, but a girl he really liked. He was amused by the way they coddled and tried not to make mistakes. Liked Amanda's attitude towards Austin, and when he stood up for Amanda with his chest, he realized that his son had finally made the right choice. The cherry on the cake was Roberta's attitude toward Frances. If his spiteful and jealous daughter is scheming, it means she senses danger. Richard would marry, and she would lose the advantage of a model wife. She announced her son's wedding and watched evil take root. Roberta was sure there would be no wedding. When Richard told the truth, his father told him he would be a fool not to marry Amanda. Richard tried to explain that Amanda had no intention of getting married. "You're the one who has no idea," Walter replied. "To know if a girl wants to get married, you have to at least ask. You seem normal, but you can't see the obvious." "I'm sure if you propose, she won't say no," Walter said to Richard. "Goodbye. What kind of mother are you?" "No, Julian will say yes," Richard replied. After talking to his father, Richard decided not to call, but to go and propose. He was already excited about the idea. He realized he couldn't live without Julian. and Austin was itching to do it. Why isn't Julian coming over? Did she forget us? Julian, will you marry me? Richard asked. Dad, without waiting for an answer, is already organizing the wedding. I'm sure you'll agree to it. Roberta's the one who's happy, he continued. Dad's sure, but I'm not so sure. You've never once said you love me. Not once have you asked me if you love me. Amanda, I love you. Will you be my wife? Amanda smiled gently and said, yes. It was a bit crowded outside the Waynwood shopping center at this hour of the morning, but that was the pattern everywhere, as the bulk of shoppers were at work or in their offices at the height of the day. The nature of Wyatt's and Felix's work allowed for some liberties in work discipline because of the risks involved. Wyatt was focused on entering the mall and Felix was resting. His eyes were closed, headphones sticking out of his ears. The music man had the music on full blast and was twitching to the beat of the rhythmic song. Wyatt occasionally glanced at his partner, but he tolerated it. One tune changed into another, and Felix went more and more into a trance. At some point he lost touch with reality and began to sing along in broken English at the top of his lungs. The song's refrain sounded twice, and he prepared for a third repetition. But Wyatt suddenly punched him between the ribs. What are you yelling for? Are you out of your fucking mind? The blow was hard, and Felix grabbed his chest with one hand and pulled out his headphones with the other. For a minute or so he tried to regain his breath, and when he did, he said, Wyatt, you're fucking crazy. How can you hit me like that? You know damn well I've had bad lungs since I was a kid. You could have knocked me out with that punch. Your head is sick, not your lungs, Wyatt snapped. That's because it's got only one gyrus, and it's a short one. Wyatt laughed at his own joke. This time he clapped his comrade on the shoulder in a friendly way. Felix staggered back. Why are you picking on me? Felix wanted to say something else, but he froze for a few seconds with his mouth open, then shrieked Wyatt. Look, it's her, you idiot. Wyatt looked back at the entrance and shook his head negatively. It doesn't look like her, Felix. She couldn't have changed so much in half an hour. And her hair is different, and her dress is not the same. Felix got worried. I'm telling you, it's her. And it's not a problem to change your hair, especially for a woman. There's a barber shop there. And you can change your clothes in 5 seconds. You just need the money. And this pretty girl probably doesn't have a lot of money. From what we know, Wyatt shook his head uncertainly again. Something's not right here. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out a photograph of a young woman in a light dress. Wyatt stared at the picture for a moment, then shifted his gaze to the girl, who was walking away from the mall with a bag in her hands. Wyatt, what are you afraid of? It's her, I'm telling you. If we lose her now, we don't know when we'll get another chance. We'll be tracking her for another week. It will come to the point that the customer will refuse, we'll find others, and our money will float into someone else's pocket, worried Felix. The last argument had an effect on the uncooperative comrade. Forgetting about the recent joke, Wyatt again pushed his partner in the side. Come on, follow the plan. Just be careful and don't be aggressive. Felix jumped out of the car and headed toward the girl who had just left the supermarket. Wyatt slowly followed his partner in the car. He saw Felix stop the girl and, actively gesturing with his hands, began to tell her something. The stranger looked around in confusion, and Felix took advantage of the moment to push her toward the car. A phrase came to Wyatt's ears. Don't worry, girl, it's not far, just 200 meters away. Like an acrobat, Wyatt performed a mind-boggling somersault. He leaned over the driver's seat, opened the rear door, and said to Felix in a disgruntled tone, Felix, aren't there enough pretty girls in our town? It seems to me anyone would agree to star in our company's commercials. But you have to give a natural blonde. Felix sat down next to the stranger. He spread his hands and said encouragingly, Girl, do not pay attention to my driver. He is always dissatisfied with something. Being indignant out of place, Wyatt said, Felix, your business is to spin the wheel. When you are in my place, then you will give advice. We need a girl like that to promote our products. She's naturally beautiful, which attracts most of the consumers of our product. He winked cheerfully at the stranger, and she smiled fearfully. "Say, what kind of product are you advertising?" "Something from cosmetics," Felix asked. "Ha ha ha, well, sort of." He laughed. The girl was completely confused. "You know, I've never been in a commercial or any kind of amateur act. I don't know if I can do it." "You can do it, doll. You can do it. And if something goes wrong, we will teach you," exclaimed the pseudo-director. Felix made a sound resembling a terrible laughter. Suddenly he squeezed the girl in his arms, and in his voice there was an unconcealed threat. "Don't drift, little bird. Everything will be okay if you behave yourself." The girl did not heed the kidnapper's advice and began to break free. "Let me go. I'll scream." "Wyatt, knock her out and tape her mouth shut," Felix advised his partner. He struck her head with his fist, and she quieted down. "Come on, Wyatt. Let's get back to the base before our charges wake up. I want to relieve the stress as soon as possible. Oh, by the way, you owe me moral damages." Wyatt was surprised. "What damage? Who kicked me twice in the back of the head? You're not getting rid of me that easily. You'll have to thank me well. And remember, if you don't, you're going to have to pay." Felix was glad he'd made his complaints to his partner at once. Wyatt hesitated to answer, but when he did, his partner shuddered. "Are you not offended that you are often nauseous, and your stomach is not accustomed to noble drinks?" Wyatt laughed again, but his peculiar laugh made Felix wince. "Why are you laughing? Better call the client. Tell him it's done. Have the rest of the money transferred." Wyatt didn't argue with his comrade. He pulled an outdated cell phone out of the glove compartment. The conversation with the client was short. "All right, we got the fish. Yes, we're taking it to the base. It's all clear, don't rub it in. You'd better hurry up and transfer the money, or we might get offended." Wyatt turned off his cell phone and threw it on the next seat with irritation. Felix asked in an unhappy tone, "What? Are you being dark again, comrade? You're starting to lay out the terms, aren't you?" I didn't like him right away. Very cloudy, and his eyes are running all over the place. "I'm afraid he's going to screw us over," Wyatt said. "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Do everything, be quiet for a while. Don't take me off the road." Felix didn't object. He shoved his headphones in his ears, and a minute later he was completely out of his world. Brian was in the parking lot of the mall waiting for his mistress, who was in need of a closet makeover today. Sharon was a fan of new clothes, which was true of all women. Brian's wife was also a fan of fashion and spent all her money on it without remorse. On this ground, in the family heated scandals, one of which once ended in divorce. But Brian did not consider himself guilty, although his former wife claimed otherwise. After the separation, they often met, and William regretfully said, Brian, you yourself destroyed our happiness." To these promising words, the former wife added piercing glances, but Brian did not fall for the acting tricks of a woman who was not averse to renew the relationship. He just knew that you cannot enter the same river twice, so as not to awaken nostalgic memories in the soul. The man changed his occupation. He quit the design department of a large enterprise and got a job as a driver for a wealthy family. The new employer turned out to be a delicate man and did not get involved in the vicissitudes of the driver's fate. This arrangement suited Brian quite well. The owner himself rarely used his services, but his wife traveled to the city every day. Despite her status, Sharon spoke to the driver as an equal, and they quickly developed a friendly relationship. But lately Brian had felt something more than friendship for this woman. Of course, the hostess noticed this change but did not reject the small signs of attention from the humble driver. And recently she confided, "Brian, you make me feel so comfortable. But what makes me especially happy is that you and I can talk about absolutely anything," Sharon said. Sharon said, and Brian asked, just to be on the safe side, "I don't think your spouse would like it if he found out." Sharon threw a short one. "My husband doesn't care. He's all about money and a spotless reputation." From the bitter note in her voice, Brian could tell that she was very lonely. He wanted to do something for this woman to make her feel happy. But he realized that this was impossible because they were separated by a social gulf. Brian was afraid of getting too attached to Sharon, and he had the thought of quitting his job. But he quickly changed his mind because he didn't want to lose the opportunity to see the woman he loved. And the other day, an incident occurred that made Brian seriously worried about the fate of his mistress. Sharon let him go and told him to go home without her. "Brian, I'm sleeping over at a friend's house tonight, Brian. My husband knows. I've warned him. I'll call you tomorrow morning and let you know when to come over." The hostess was often at her friend's house or her mother's, so the driver saw nothing strange in her request. He calmly returned to the country house, where he had his own room in the outbuilding. Brian was surprised when he saw the gate open wide, but more perplexing to him was the unfamiliar foreign car in the yard of the mansion. During 3 years of work in this house, Brian had learned the circle of acquaintances of his masters. But this was the first time he'd seen this car. The man closed the automatic gate and headed toward the house. Voices were coming from the gazebo in the back of the garden. He realized that the owner was discussing an unpleasant matter with someone because the conversation was in high tones. Brian strained his hearing involuntarily, but what he heard made him dumbfounded. On the spot, the man had no sooner fully realized what his host was up to than he ordered his interlocutors, who remained out of Brian's sight. "That's it, you can go away. Don't come here again. If any confusion arises, use this phone, then dump it in the river or somewhere else. In short, get rid of it," said the owner. Brian ducked into the bushes just in time, because 2 guys crawled out of the gazebo. Both of them had no signs of intelligence on their faces, but Brian guessed that such characters would stop at nothing. The next morning, when Brian met the landlady at the appointed place, he said to her, "Sharon, you are in danger." He told the woman what he had seen and heard, but she was not surprised. "Thank you, Brian. I admit I expected something like this because my husband has been acting strange lately and demanding the impossible from me. So I suspected he'd be looking for a way to influence me. But I'll tell you honestly, I don't know how I should go about it." Brian decided to take responsibility for this fragile woman's life. "Sharon, I know what to do, but you have to trust me completely." The landlady didn't object. Knowing the intruder's plan, Brian assumed that they would set up a surveillance on the woman. He decided to use their methodology, hoping it would prevent a tragedy. But the unexpected happened. Brian saw one of the thugs lead a girl who looked something like his landlady to the car. He really wanted to follow the criminal's car, but he had to wait for his mistress. When Sharon came out of the mall, the driver rushed to her. "Sharon, get in the car. Sharon, get in the car. We have to get out of town right away." The driver's excitement was transmitted to the woman. "Brian, what's wrong? I've never seen you so worried." The worried man explained briefly. "You remember our conversation yesterday, don't you? It happened right in front of my eyes. But those freaks kidnapped another woman by mistake. She looked a little like you," Sharon said in a deafening voice. "Let's go," and got in the car. She was silent for a long time, thinking about what she had heard from the faithful driver. Then, very quietly, Sharon asked, "Brain, could you take me somewhere where my husband won't find me? I know him very well. He will stop at nothing to accomplish what he wants to do. I can't go to my mom's house and I can't even warn her." Brian said confidently, "I know a place like this. You'll be perfectly safe there. You just need to get rid of your cell phone first, just in case." They had traveled a decent distance on the federal highway when they noticed a jumble of cars and people ahead. Brian noted excitedly, "It looks like an accident. We could be stuck here for a long time." The woman asked in a slumped voice, "And what should we do?" The man smiled. "Luckily, there are detours besides the new roads. We'll figure it out now and use the old highway." If Brian and his companion had not turned off the federal highway, they would have seen a familiar car smashed to pieces. Medics arriving on the scene were unable to save the 2 men injured in the crash. The paramedic concluded. They didn't stand a chance. injuries incompatible with life. One of the dead men was smiling with headphones still in his ears. It was an ominous picture. The bodies of the dead were taken away, and law enforcement officials continued to work at the accident scene. One tentatively suggested, "Intuition tells me there was another person in the car." The investigator cast the young lad with the testing look of a trainee surveying a bit of the neighborhood. "It's possible there's another victim. Maybe he was thrown aside?" The young specialist rushed to run the errand. For 3 hours he crawled through the thicket until a senior officer called him. "Student, what's up?" The guy really wanted to distinguish himself, but he did not see anything that confirmed the version of his senior colleague. "It's all clear. A little grass crumpled. But most likely the animals are resting here." The investigator grinned. "The animals are on 2 legs. Probably the road workers were resting at lunchtime. That's it, trainee, jump in the car, and we'll leave it here, and you'll walk to the city." The emergency services left, and active traffic on the highway resumed. Word of mouth had already managed to inform the public that as a result of the accident 2 people lost their lives, and by nightfall the first bouquets of wildflowers appeared at the site of the tragedy. A sun bunny jumped into the open window, reflecting on the glass. Then it ran along the ceiling and froze on the wall almost next to Vivian's head. The girl gingerly touched the living spot with her finger. "Hello, thanks for waking me up." The messenger of the sun trembled, expressing his emotions in such an unusual way. After that, the bunny again ran along the wall, but immediately returned back to the very headboard of the bed where the girl was sleeping. After waiting a few seconds, he jumped on Vivian's face. The girl laughed ringingly. "What are you doing, little one? Don't be naughty. Or have you decided to kiss me?" Vivian resolutely threw back the blanket and got out of bed. The living stain bounced in fright on the wall, and a moment later flew out the window. The girl said disappointedly, "Well, that's what you call a conversation. You shamelessly woke me up and immediately disappeared." She went to the window and stretched sweetly. "How nice it is here. I'm in a wonderful fairy tale, and I don't know for what merits I got such happiness." Vivian's morning monologue was interrupted by an elderly voice under the window. "How long have you been asleep, beauty? We don't do that in the village. Here it is customary to get up at dawn, otherwise you can sleep through everything." Vivian opened the window sash wide and looked down where Dustin was tidying up the lawn. She was not offended by the old man's words, for there was some truth in what he said, and secondly, he spoke without rancor. Looking out of the window, Vivian said jokingly, "Uncle Dustin, scolding me. I did turn into Sleeping Beauty because I slept through lunch. But I'd like to point out that you and Susan are to blame. You've been overprotective of me these days." The old man pulled himself away from his work and grudgingly arched his back. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve and then looked up at Vivian. The girl was once again struck by the man's penetrating gaze. After all, Dustin, according to his personal documents, was only 4 years short of his centennial. The old man's heroic past was legendary to this day. He was often invited to educational institutions for meetings with young people. Dustin gladly attended such events, telling schoolchildren and students about his military past. When Vivian tragically came to Noah's house, the first thing she learned was the heroic story of the former freedom fighter and patriot Dustin. The old man himself did not like to talk about his services. Only on rare occasions did he remember the past and cry. "Those bastards took my whole family from me. I survived by a miracle, as if fate had taken me away from the village that day. My mom sent me to my uncle for flour. That spring was hungry and cold. We were out of all the supplies we hid from her, so my mother sent me to Uncle Willie in the next village. I came back and my house was gone and no one was there. Then the monsters burned down the whole village. I wanted to go back to my uncle, but he had 7 at home, so I joined the rebels." What surprised Vivian most of all was that Dustin remembered in great detail the events that had taken place 80 years ago. She herself could not boast of a good memory, because something had happened in her life 2 months ago that had robbed her of her past. Every night before going to bed, Vivian tried to remember something, but she ran into a black wall of oblivion. And no matter how much she tried, she could not break this barrier, or at least find a small slit that would open a piece of the past. Now her life began with the day that young Deputy Noah had found her in the woods. True, she herself remembered everything vaguely, but thanks to the detailed stories of the Savior himself and his relatives, a more or less coherent story was built up in her mind. Living without the past was very hard. But Vivian had hoped that one day she would remember everything. Noah and his family tried to convince her of that, too. Susan was especially supportive. She often told her, "You don't despair and don't try to spur yourself on. In time, your memory will wake up and you will remember everything. Perhaps not all at once will be clear, and will come back a drop at a time. So be patient and wait." Following the advice of Noah's mother, Vivian waited patiently for her memory to return. Almost every night she had vivid dreams involving different people. Surely in these visions was the key to her past. But when she woke up, she forgot everything. "What's on your mind, beautiful?" Dustin's cheerful voice brought Vivian back to the present day. She replied with a smile, "I'm not fully awake yet." The old man shouted, "It happens. Especially when you're young, when you have everything ahead of you. I've already stopped dreaming. No sooner do I close my eyes in the evening than it's morning they don't fly like a flock of birds." Dustin exhaled with feeling. "I see I caught you at a gallop." Ignoring the old man's grumbling, Vivian said, "Smart people say that life is good at any age, so I'm trying to be useful, digging in the ground a little at a time. If you want, I can help you," offered Ludmila. The old man revived. "I'd love to, and the two of us will have more fun working together. Vivian, I'll just get dressed quickly." Vivian made the bed and began to look for suitable clothes for work in the garden. But since her closet was very sparse, she threw on the robe Susan had given her. Although the gift was several sizes larger, this fact did not upset the girl. "Nothing. I'll make a belt out of bandages to keep this outfit from falling off me," she said. Dustin was also busily digging in the flower bed. He didn't even turn around when his assistant appeared. "I have to start by giving you a little briefing," the old man said. The girl laughed, throwing her head back. "I'm ready to answer all your questions." Dustin had a straight back. "Good. There are no special secrets in this kind of work. You have to pick the grass carefully and loosen the ground under each bush, but be careful not to damage the roots. Then the flower will begin to wither and may die. Here's a tool for you." Dustin held out a miniature tool that looked like a rake. Vivian began to work with enthusiasm, and the old man watched the process for a while. Then he realized that his ward was doing a good job and contentedly moved on to a nearby flower bed. For about half an hour they labored without respite, until they were invited to breakfast by Susan. "Laborers, it's time to eat. Just wash your hands." Vivian could not get used to some of the peculiarities of country life. But most of all, she was confused by the location of the toilet and wash basin. Every morning the mistress filled the tanks with fresh water, which quickly ran out. The girl leisurely made her way to the wash basin. She knew that according to local customs one should give way to the elders. But Dustin was in no hurry. He was putting the finishing touches on his flower bed. Noticing that the girl was standing at a loss, the old man shouted, "Don't wait for me. I'll be a little late. I'll have time to satiate myself." The old man appeared on the veranda, which in the summertime served as a dining room. When Vivian and Susan had almost finished their breakfast, the hostess grinned. "Grandfather, they put a perpetual motion machine in you. At your age, you should be lying on the stove and reading the newspaper." The man laughed. "I would have been lying on the stove and spitting at the ceiling if you hadn't torn it down." The old man turned to Vivian. "There used to be a real Russian stove in the house. I made it myself when the house was built. The stove didn't bother anyone, except my granddaughter. She wanted to make everything urban, and the stove took up a lot of space. So they tore it down and didn't tell me. I came home from fishing, and the house was in shambles. The wall was broken, and the stove was gone. I almost had a heart attack on the spot." Susan gave Dustin a kindly shout. "Stop your crying. It's been so many years, and you can't get over it. But it's a lot of room. God willing, soon we'll have water and gas to the house, and it'll be no worse than a city apartment. Vivian had an involuntary gasp. Really? An apartment? She laughed. Yes, I suppose so. I'm not sure. But something tells me I've been living in an apartment. And just a few days ago I had the feeling that I used to live in another city, and then I came here. Susan looked affectionately at the girl. I told you your memory would wake up. You're already starting to remember a little bit. Dustin decided to put in his weighty word. I can't say anything about the apartment. But I can say that Vivian has some experience in the field of floriculture. It is not without reason that they say that hands remember everything. The girl was a great hand at the flower garden. And what did I notice? She talked to the flowers. That doesn't just happen out of the blue. So she dealt with them before. Vivian was amazed at the old man's conclusions. She forgot about the unfinished tea, because in her mind began to resurface pictures reminiscent of newsreel footage. She saw a little girl bent over the beds. The girl was crying, and a thin woman with a pained face was scolding her. This vision of a few seconds' duration gave her an unpleasant shiver, but as soon as the girl took a deep breath, everything instantly disappeared. Susan noticed what was happening to her guest, but said nothing. Only in the evening, when her son came home, she said thoughtfully, "Noah, listen to me and try to understand. I have nothing against this poor girl, but we know nothing about her past. And I don't like it." The young man exclaimed with irritation, "Mommy, you're starting again. I told you to be patient for a while." Susan also raised her voice. "I am patient, but neither I nor you know what lies behind that innocent exterior. Have you thought that your Vivian might be in trouble with the law?" Noah waved his hands. "Mom, why do you always go to extremes? You see horrors everywhere, and in every person you try to see a criminal." Susan objected. "Not everyone. I even like this girl, but I'd still like to know about her past. I recently talked to our Pamela, and she told me a lot of interesting things about the human brain." Noah couldn't contain his laughter. "But please don't burden me with any unproven theories." The woman objected hotly. "Why unproven? Pamela has been working in medicine for over 20 years. She saved so many lives. Everyone trusts her. And so do I. She wouldn't say anything that wasn't true." Noah didn't want to upset his mother, so he gave in. "Okay, spit it out. What did the paramedic tell you?" Susan did not hurry with the story. She first filled a deep plate to the brim and put it in front of her son. "Eat up, you're hungry for the day." The young man grinned. "Susan, do you know how to approach a person? You would make a great psychologist." The woman was flattered by her son's compliment. She sat down on the chair opposite and with an important look began to tell the story. "A couple of days ago I met Pamela at the store. She asked me how our lost dog was doing. That's what she dubbed Vivian." Noah looked at his mother reproachfully. "Mom, I told you not to spread the word." Susan shouted without interrupting him. "I'm not in the business of spreading gossip. But in our case, it wouldn't hurt to consult a specialist. Pamela was treating the girl. When you brought her in, you could say she got her back on her feet." Noah knew it was useless to argue with his mother. "Yes, Mom, she did cure Vivian. But you wanted to tell me something about the peculiarities of human memory?" Susan slapped her forehead with the palm of her hand. "You got me talking, Noah. I was on the wrong wavelength. Pamela told me that the human brain is so organized that it can replay bad memories. It's especially common in children. But it happens to adults, too, if they've had horrible things happen in their lives." Noah pushed his plate away. "But Vivian's past the age of childhood. And the reasons for her amnesia are on the surface. She suffered a serious head injury. Perhaps she was hit or fell, but I think she was a victim of kidnapping. When I found her, there were visible rope or wire marks on her wrists, indicating that her hands had been tied." Susan was surprised. "You didn't tell me anything about that." The young man put his arm around his mother's shoulders. "Mom, have you forgotten where your son works? And about your concerns? I mean, there's nothing illegal about Vivian. I ran her through the database, and she's clean." Noah went to the window. "I'd like to know more about her myself. My gut tells me that Vivian got into some kind of trouble by accident. If only she had some identification on her. The only thing she has is a certificate, or rather a referral from the personnel group, issued the day before the fatal event. Noah, would you go into town and find that company?" "Mom, you're too late for advice. I went to that company, I showed them that paper. But the girl I was lucky enough to talk to said she couldn't remember everyone, because so many people pass through their office every day that by evening her eyes are blurry. And they give these referrals to everyone who applies for a job. I showed her Vivian's picture, but I got a negative response." Susan thought again. "So Vivian must have come from somewhere, most likely, and it is not a fact that she is a citizen of our country. It's good that at least her last name is known." Suddenly Susan exclaimed, "Hey Noah, I just had a thought. Why didn't I think of it before? You asked your colleagues in the city they keep lost documents. Maybe our Vivian's passport was accidentally lost there." Noah liked his mother's idea. The next day he called his friend, with whom he had once served together in the city, and asked him for help. That same day, towards evening, the friend made a return call. "Noah, you've given me a problem. You have no idea how many times today I was sent in different directions. So what do you owe me?" Noah realized that his friend had found out some useful information. He promised cheerfully, "I'll pay you back any way I can." And then he heard a satisfied voice. "I'll take you at your word. But the most suitable will be a leader equivalent and a personal meeting. Anyway, a passport with these data was found at the scene of a traffic accident that happened more than 2 months ago. There were 2 fatalities, by the way. The accident happened near your neighborhood. You must have heard about it. The case is kind of closed because there's no crime." "And the evidence? Was there a lady's purse found in there too?" "We're keeping it at the police station." "Yeah, if you really need it, I can help you." "Buddy, I really need that passport. This purse was stolen from a good friend of mine." I got it. Have your friend file a report. It's a formality, but you can't do it without it." When Noah handed Vivian her lost document, the girl could not cope with excitement. She stared at the passport for a long time, hesitating to open it. The young man encouraged his ward. "Vivian, don't be afraid, it's your passport. A purse was also found. Maybe you will recognize your things and remember something." The girl hesitantly opened the document and read aloud. "Vivian." She shifted a surprised look to Noah. "I come from Cleveland. But how did you know the answer to that question? Did you want to get a job here? And this certificate confirms that fact." Noah held out the only document the girl had on her when he found her in the woods near the federal highway. "Vivian, you'll remember everything. All indications are that you were in some kind of trouble. You were driving somewhere with 2 guys. There was an accident." The girl asked in a detached way. "Where are the men I was traveling with?" The man didn't answer right away. "They're both dead. You were saved by some miracle. Most likely, when the car went into the ditch, you were thrown out of the cabin." Vivian turned pale and her hands shook. "I don't remember anything. I want to remember, but I'm falling into a void. How can I live with it?" The girl was in tears. Noah tried to calm her down. "Try to start from scratch. I will be by your side, so do not be afraid of anything." Vivian trustingly clung to the shoulder of her savior. She really wanted to believe in the possibility of a fresh start. "Noah, I'll try. I want so much to be like everyone else. I want to work, to be useful. You can do it. And I'll help you with your new life." Susan went to the kitchen, but froze when she saw this touching scene. Her motherly heart began to beat in a very strong rhythm, and the thought flashed through her mind: has Noah really fallen in love? Lord, he hasn't had time to recover from one love. And again. The loving mother realized that it was no longer in her power to control the fate of her son. Sighing sorrowfully, she tiptoed back to the large room where Grandpa Dustin was watching television. The old man was glad to see his granddaughter and slammed his hand on the couch. "Sit down, Susan. There's a good war movie on." Susan sat down next to the elderly relative. She looked at the screen, but saw her son embracing the girl who so unexpectedly broke into their quiet life. Since kindergarten, Noah had dreamed of serving in the police force. After all, his father fought crime for many years, and he really wanted to be like his dad. But one day his father didn't come home from the service, even though Noah was looking forward to it. Then men in uniform came to them and said that Daddy was gone, that he was dead. Pamela cried a lot. And a black ribbon appeared on Daddy, on the framed portrait of him smiling. That was the day Noah learned what death was like. On the day of his father's funeral, Noah didn't shed a tear, because he remembered his dad saying a man should be like a rock. And no tears. Dad continued to be an example to Noah even after his death. Susan did not hinder her son's desire to continue his father's work, even though she was very worried about him. After school, Noah did not go to the institute, as his classmates. When asked by the curious, he cheerfully replied, "First I will serve in the army. Then I will enter the police academy." His peers chuckled quietly behind his back, considering Noah detached from life, because many of his peers were trying to get a warmer place. But Noah paid no attention to the ridicule. He had a dream, and he was ready for any hardship for its realization. Thanks to his father's old connections, after the army he got a job in the district police department, and a year later he entered a specialized university by correspondence. Before the young law enforcement officer opened the most tempting prospects. But his career went downhill when he met Miranda. This girl from the family of a status official had too high demands. And Noah, no matter how hard he tried, could not satisfy all the whims of his beloved. But he did not lose hope, and almost all the money he earned spent on gifts for Miranda. But one day a terrible thing happened. Noah saw his girlfriend in the arms of another man. Without a second thought, he got into a fight in the street. Noah thought he was defending the honor of his girlfriend, but Miranda called him a jerk and said that she was not going to connect her life with such a lowlife like him. Just the next day, the whole district department learned about the outrageous act of the senior lieutenant. Noah was summoned to the office of the chief, who was not shy in expressions. "Noy, do you think that you are allowed everything? Do you even know on whom you raised your dirty hands?" It turned out that the major he beat up was the son of the deputy mayor. Obviously, after such an egregious incident, the offending officer got the punishment he deserved. Noah was sent to the most remote area of the state, where a vacancy for a precinct officer had opened up. He steadfastly endured this blow of fate, but realized that now in the near future nothing shines on the horizon. It was a difficult time in the life of their small family. Susan was very worried about her son and repeatedly suggested to him, "Noy, I can ask Uncle Henry to help you get back to work in town." The late father's old friend, Henry, had never refused to help them, but this time the son forbade them to ask him. "Mom, I did it myself. I'm responsible. I mean, it's not that big a deal. I was not exiled to the North Pole. People live in the village too, and it's my job to keep order there." Susan never revisited the matter again, and she did not ask her son about that fatal girl who in fact ruined his career. But one day Noah spoke up at dinner. He began the conversation with a question that still has no answer. "Mom, tell me, why are women so conniving?" Susan wondered. "Noah, why are you asking me such an unusual question?" Noah smirked sourly. "Because women understand the psychology of their own more clearly." Unable to find the right word, the mother looked reproachfully at her son. "If you wanted to use a rude word, it is very ugly. But I will not be able to answer your question, because the actions of any person, regardless of gender, depend on many reasons. As for you personally, I'll tell you straight, you're not in your own garden. Girls like your Miranda live only for their own interests, and it's foolish to hope that she'll change one day. Later, when things cool down, you'll thank Providence for breaking up with Miranda." Noah's face grew serious. "I guess you're right, Mom. I knew Miranda wasn't for me. But my heart was in the right place. No matter, son, time will pass, and you will meet a girl who will be ready to share all the joys and sorrows with you." Noah took her mother's words as her attempt to reassure him. But now, after several years, they seemed prophetic to him. And Vivian's appearance was no accident. He believed that fate itself had sent him this girl. The young man's heart blossomed a timid flower, and a new love was born, but he was in no hurry to open up. Vivian understood what was happening to her savior, but also did not want to rush things. The girl had already fully settled into Noah's house, or rather the house of grandfather Dustin. He was the one who had offered his granddaughter and great-grandson shelter when they were forced to leave the city. The old man sometimes grumbled, calling his relatives settlers, but he was glad he didn't have to spend his life alone. The unusual behavior of the young men did not escape Dustin's discerning eye. One afternoon on his favorite couch, the old man called out to his granddaughter, "Vivian, come here. I want to tell you something." Susan was tidying up the house, but she put the broom aside because she could not disobey her grandfather. She came closer to him. "What was your thought?" Dustin looked at his granddaughter, and she noticed the mischievous twinkle in his eyes. It was a sure sign that the old man was about to say something shocking. And indeed, after a short preparation, the elderly relative confidently said, "I think, Mother, it is time for you to prepare." "What to prepare for?" Grandpa's fantasizing again. Susan's voice had a touch of irritation in it. "What's fantasizing when it's all out in the open? Don't you realize how madly in love they are with each other?" "Who are they?" the woman asked unhappily. The old man repeated sneeringly, "They are. Don't pretend you don't know who I'm talking about. Only a blind man wouldn't notice the eyes Noah is looking at Vivian with. You're not blind." "Your eyesight's fine," the old man chuckled again. "So much for the police officer, who everyone in the village says is unapproachable. Noah is strict in public. And in front of Vivian, I didn't invent it. I have a good eye." "Grandfather, you're at it again," Susan scolded in a low voice. "Where did you put your experience? To spy on your great-grandson?" The woman went back to her homework, but she couldn't get the conversation with her elderly relative out of her head. When her son came home from work, Susan asked him right away, "Noah, is there anything you want to say to your mother?" He looked at his parent and smiled stupidly. "Mom, hi. I love you very much. Can I go in the house?" Susan was confused. She felt embarrassed in front of her son for such a meeting. She became anxious and fussed, trying to correct her mistake. "Come straight to the veranda. I'll feed you." The young man looked around. "Where is Vivian? Isn't she back yet?" "She left this morning and hasn't come back yet. What do you want?" "The man's got a job. It'll take him days to get used to it." With Susan's encouragement, Vivian got a job with social services. To begin with, she was allocated 4 wards, which she had to help daily with household chores. Despite the remoteness of the old people whom the girl served, she was quite satisfied with her work. Just the other day, the girl confided to Susan, "At least now I'll have something to do. I'm already so tired of idleness." Noah's mother objected. "Don't be so hard on yourself. You always help me. And grandfather, he's very fond of you. He says he couldn't do his farm without you." Vivian came back when it was getting dark outside. Noah ran out of the house to meet the girl. For 5 minutes, the young people whispered about something on the porch. Only after a short negotiation did they enter the house. From their happy faces, Susan guessed what they wanted to tell. Tears glistened in the mother's eyes when the son, stammering, said, "Mom, Grandpa, Vivian and I have decided to get married. Tomorrow we will go to the city to apply." The old man decided to exercise the right of seniority and speak out on the matter. "Come on, hurry up. I might get drunk at your wedding. Who knows, maybe it will be the last celebration in my earthly life. Even good people don't get drunk there." It's a perpetual prohibition. Grandpa, I knew you'd ruin it. Susan shouted at the old man. You've got a tongue like a broomstick. People are getting married, and he's talking about drinking. You ought to be ashamed to talk about such things at your age. Vivian and Noah laughed at Dustin's antics. Susan looked at them fondly and laughed too. Before going to town, Noah was a little wary, and at the same time hopeful that Vivian would remember something from her past. The girl was very nervous, so she chatted nonstop the whole way. The main topic of conversation was her wards, whom she affectionately called old people. Noah listened attentively and occasionally made brief comments. When they had just entered the city, Vivian suddenly confessed, I've been here before. I've been here before. She was immediately embarrassed and corrected herself. I think I've been here. Noah said nothing, and Vivian fell silent. She perked up again when they passed the city mall. Oh, that store sells such beautiful things, but everything is very expensive. And there are escalators instead of stairs. I almost fell down when I wanted to get up, and one disgruntled aunt called me a redneck. A happy smile lit up the girl's face, and Noah involuntarily admired his chosen one. How beautiful she is after all flashed through his mind, and aloud he said, Vivian, did you buy anything at the city? The smile faded instantly, and the girl said with despair, I don't know. I don't remember. I remember the escalator and the aunt, but not the rest, Vivian said sadly. Noah encouraged his companion. The fact that you already remembered something is a small victory. Don't strain yourself, your memory will gradually thaw. To cheer up the girl's mood, Noah decided to tell her a fresh anecdote on the subject. One man goes to the doctor and complains of poor memory, and the doctor advises him lend money more often. That's the best way to train your memory. Vivian laughed for a long time, comparing herself to the hapless patient. Noah was glad that he managed to divert the girl's attention. But another disappointment awaited the couple in love. The registry office was closed for lunch. Vivian began to look for a bad sign, but Noah grinned. Vivian, you're wrong. It's a very good sign that you and I need to eat, too. You see that cafe across the street over there? The girl followed her lover's gaze and nodded. Aha, I see. True, I'm not very hungry yet, but I won't refuse a cup of coffee. In a small cozy room reigned a pleasant semi-darkness, and a romantic mood was added by soft lyrical music. The young people had barely had time to take a seat at a free table when a waiter ran up to them. Noah ordered 2 coffees and 1 portion of dessert, please. Vivian was surprised. Noah, you wanted a refreshment, didn't you? The man smiled. Let's go home after the registry office and celebrate the occasion. The waiter quickly brought the order, but the future newlyweds only had time to take a sip of the invigorating drink. An unfamiliar man jumped up to the table, whose look did not bode well. He roughly grabbed Vivian by the arm and shouted across the room. Where are you going to hide from me? Did you run off with that geezer and think I wouldn't find you? The stranger was clearly in an inadequate state. Everything happened so fast that Noah didn't have time to realize it in time. He came to his senses only when the man began to pull Vivian from the table. Come home. I'll show you how to deceive your husband, the stranger shouted. Noah knew from his own experience that in such situations words are useless. Much more convincing would be decisive action. With an elusive movement, he struck the stranger's pain point, and the stranger, releasing Vivian's hand, bent in half. Vivian was shaking with fear and crying. The cafe staff jumped to Noah's aid. What happened? Why did that man attack you? They asked. Noah just shrugged his shoulders. It's the first time I've seen this man, and I don't understand why he was harassing my fiancée. While the proceedings were going on, one of the staff members managed to call the police. Noah showed his ID and gave a brief account of the blatant assault. All the while, the stranger, who identified himself as Vivian's husband, growled angrily and threatened her. You shouldn't have done that. I don't forgive such offenses." The enraged visitor rushed toward Vivian, but he was restrained by two sturdy workers. Their good physical condition showed that they could not only serve the customers, but could also calm down violent visitors if necessary. The senior of the arriving police squad suggested that everyone go to the station. "We will find out all the circumstances and draw up a report." At the station, the violent man was immediately placed in a cell, which the officers themselves called the monkey house. He was still shouting, demanding a lawyer. Noah thought wistfully that the case would drag on into the evening, but not even half an hour passed, when an employee with a folder of documents entered the office where the major was talking to him. "Comrade Major, there's been a mix-up. The assailant is Justin, a well-known businessman. About 6 months ago, his wife disappeared, or rather, she was kidnapped. The criminals only called the victim once and demanded a ransom." The major began to scrutinize the documents. "I take it the missing woman was never found?" "That's right, they haven't found her," confirmed the junior officer. "The perpetrators never contacted us again. We sent out an APB, but to no avail." The officer nodded at Vivian, then pointed to the photo of the missing woman in the folder. "This lady looks a lot like Grace, the kidnapped spouse of the businessman," the employee said. Vivian jumped up in her chair. "I don't know any Grace, and I've never seen that crazy man who attacked me in my life either. I even came here to find a good job because jobs are bad in our city. You can quickly establish through your channels that I'm telling the truth." The major looked at the girl with undisguised surprise. "We'll find out for sure. Don't worry." But Vivian could not hold back any longer. She shifted her gaze to her fiancé. "Noah, I had an epiphany, and I remembered everything. Or almost everything. I lived with my mother, but she drank heavily, and she made me serve neighbors and acquaintances to earn money for her. Because of that, I often missed school, but the teachers took pity on me. And then my mother died, her heart failed, and I was left alone. But just after the funeral, some strangers showed up and told me that my mother had mortgaged the apartment shortly before her death. These people took pity on me and gave me some money. There was nothing left to do but leave the town where I grew up." Noah stared at the girl with wide-open eyes. What he had heard from her did not fit in his mind, but at the same time he was infinitely glad that her memory had returned to her. Not paying attention to the presence of strangers, Vivian told how, after visiting the office of the recruitment company, went to the shopping center to buy clothes suitable for work in the greenhouse. "That's where a young guy approached me. He was so convincing that I agreed. It wasn't a long drive, but when I got in the car, almost immediately I realized that I was just divorced. I screamed, wanted to get out, but I was hit very hard on the head." The girl was shaking with excitement. Noah hugged her gently. "Don't worry, everything will be all right." "Now we will go home," said the major. Noah asked, "I haven't let you go yet. Are you going to write a statement?" he asked his companion. "Vivian, will you be writing a report on the citizen who mistook you for his wife?" The girl shook her head intensely. "No, though it was unpleasant for me. The man has such grief. He is understandable, for he has lost his wife. Apparently she and I are alike. That explains his strange behavior." They left the office and headed for the exit. When Vivian appeared, the businessman jumped up and shouted, "Grace, come back. I'll forgive you everything." Vivian stopped. "You've made a mistake. I'm not your wife. My name is Vivian." A realized expression appeared in the businessman's eyes. He calmly interrogated, "Vivian, where is my Grace?" There was so much genuine surprise in his question that Noah, experienced in such matters, took notice. He whispered to his companion, "I have the impression that this sufferer is surprised at the very fact of his wife's disappearance. There's something wrong here. But it's none of our business. Let's get out of here." After such a tumultuous event, they both wanted to catch their breath, but Noah said, "Vivian, we'll still have time to go to the registry office." The girl tried to object. "Noah, maybe some other time? After what happened today, I want to get home as soon as possible." I understand, but I think we should go through with it. We have to file a report today. I don't want this kind of situation to happen again. They wrote their applications and chose a convenient day to get married. But this momentous occasion paled in comparison to what happened to them in the cafe. Even the return of Vivian's memory overrode that incident. All the way Noah was absorbed in his thoughts. It was only as they approached their destination that he shared with his fiancée. Vivian, that businessman won't get out of my head. There's something wrong with him. I can feel it in my gut. The girl asked in an indifferent tone, "What are you going to do?" "I want to find out the truth." "Noah, why do you need someone else's problems?" The man smiled. "I don't know myself yet, but my professional intuition tells me that this Justin is up to something. And I don't like coincidences. They're never coincidences." The girl guessed what the groom was hinting at. "You didn't like the fact that I look like that rich man's wife." "You guessed it. Of course, there are people who look a lot alike. They say everyone has a double somewhere on the other side of the planet. It's possible that your doppelganger is walking around somewhere." Vivian was shocked by this version. She kept silent all the way home because she was afraid of hearing something else overwhelming. Grace crouched on the edge of the bed where her mother lay and asked affectionately, "Mommy, please don't refuse to eat. You need to eat well. And then you will get well." The sick woman turned away. Grace knew that this movement meant refusing to eat, but she kept urging. "Mommy, you're acting like a little, very stubborn girl. Tell me honestly, do you want to get better?" Penelope covered her eyes, and Grace saw a small tear roll down her mother's cheek. The daughter said more sternly, "Mom, your behavior is only making your condition worse. And the doctor said that you need to eat nutritious food. He also said that if you follow all his recommendations, you will regain your speech and ability to move." Grace spoke very convincingly, and the patient opened her mouth. The girl rejoiced. "Well, that's a different story." She patiently fed her mother. Her mind was full of unhappy thoughts. When Brian had taken her to his father's house, which was in a small town, Grace had only thought of one thing: "I wish Justin hadn't found me here." She was afraid to be alone and wouldn't let Brian go. Even though he had repeatedly wanted to return to town to find out how Justin had reacted to the failure of her kidnapping. Several times Brian had called an acquaintance who worked for the rich man's company, but the man hadn't told him anything definitive. Justin is walking around angry, lashing out at everyone like he's off the chain. One of the girls in the accounting department asked him where Grace was. He got so mad he called her a bunch of names and threatened to fire everyone. "So I can't tell you anything positive." Brian relayed the conversation to Grace, but she wasn't surprised. "Let him suffer. He can't do anything without my signature. I guess my husband didn't consider that when he was planning his plan. And I did not even know what he had in mind when he insistently asked me to give the company to him in full management. I almost gave in to his pleas. Thanks to my mom for bringing me back down to earth." Grace often thought of her mother. But for the first few days after her forced escape, she didn't dare visit her. Only after a week she arrived late in the evening in the town, where there was a cottage parents. After the death of her husband, Penelope settled there, convincing her daughter that here she feels much better than in the city. Her mother had health problems before, and the daughter was not accidentally worried about her. Even on the way to the cottage, the young woman felt a strange anxiety. She told Brian about it. "Brian, I've got a bad feeling about this. I should have visited my mom sooner." The driver sighed heavily. "I offered you my help, but you didn't want to let me go." "That's right. I didn't want to let you go because I was afraid. It's a well-known fact that fear is great." When they arrived at the familiar house, Grace realized that she had been worried about her mother for a reason. The windows in the house were not lit, and the door was locked. The girl knocked at the neighbors, and Aunt Lida, seeing her, cried, "Grace, at last you're here. There was such a thing." The neighbor told how about a week ago Justin came to the town and began to demand money from Penelope. He threatened the poor woman and said that if she didn't give him the money, she would never see her daughter again. Grace listened to her neighbor and whispered, "What a scoundrel. He organized my kidnapping himself. And he had the nerve to demand money from my mother." The neighbor didn't understand. "Grace, what are you talking about?" The young woman replied evasively. "Well, nothing. Just thinking out loud. Aunt Lida, where is Mom?" The neighbor darted her eyes again in surprise. "Didn't I tell you that she's in the hospital? As soon as your husband left, Penelope had a seizure. She came to me and asked me to call an ambulance. They took her to the county hospital. I visit her every day. But honestly, she's not doing well." Grace didn't listen to her neighbor's lamentations and rushed to the hospital. They wouldn't let her see her mother and even threatened to call the police. "Young lady, where are you going in the middle of the night? We have a strict regime. Come back tomorrow morning." The doctor on duty heard the screams of the nurse and decided to deal with it. Fortunately, he turned out to be a kind man. After listening to Grace's rambling story, the doctor said, "Okay, I'll let you see your mom if you answer just one question. Where were you before? Why did you only remember now that you have a mother?" Although the doctor asked 2 questions, not one as promised. Grace answered him, "I only learned of my mother's illness today, and I could not visit her before because of circumstances." The doctor exclaimed indignantly, "I don't understand what circumstances there can be when a loved one is 1 foot in the grave." The doctor turned around, showing his attitude toward his negligent daughter. He took a few steps and said more gently, "Pardon me for my rudeness. Come into the room, but no more than 5 minutes. Your mom cannot worry. She had a stroke with severe consequences. She can't speak and she's barely moving." Grace walked on stiff legs to the room where Penelope was lying. She cautiously opened the door and immediately saw the motherly gaze fixed on her. There was despair and hope in that gaze, rebuke and joy. Grace rushed to her sick mother's bedside, struggling to hold back her tears. She remembered the doctor's warning and tried to smile. Mommy, I'm here. I won't leave you again." Grace spent the rest of the night in the emergency room. She wanted to talk to the attending physician, who was not due at the hospital until 8. Unlike the doctor on duty, this specialist spoke to his patient's daughter reluctantly, limiting himself to the standard phrases. "We are doing everything possible, but we cannot guarantee a favorable outcome. And, we do not have the same conditions as in a regional hospital or a specialized clinic." Grace listened to the doctor, realizing that she did not trust him. She blurted out, "I would like to transfer my mom to another medical facility." The attending physician asked just as coldly, "And what are you not satisfied with our hospital?" The girl blurted out, "Indifference." The doctor wrinkled his nose but said, "Your will. You can take your mom even today, although I wouldn't recommend transporting her in her condition." Brian was waiting for his mistress in the parking lot. Grace asked him without preamble, "Brian, you have a large circle of acquaintances, and I'm sure there are medical professionals among your close friends." The driver didn't seem surprised by his hostess's statement. He answered calmly, "There are such specialists. Do you want to move my mom to another clinic?" "Yes, I don't like this hospital. Mom needs a good specialist." Penelope spent 3 weeks in a private clinic recommended to Grace by a Dr. Brian knew. After a course of intensive treatment, the woman's condition improved markedly. She even tried to speak, but instead of words, she only made some sounds. Her motor ability never returned. After examining the woman, the professor reassured his daughter. "Such patients have a very long recovery period. Therefore, I advise you to be patient and trust in the Almighty. Positive dynamics is observed, but we need a second course." Grace picked up her mom. She wanted to go back to town, but Brian told her not to take any chances. "Grace, I've heard rumors that your husband is looking for you very actively. I'm not sure he's doing it in good faith. So it's too soon for you to be in town. And Penelope requires care. My home may not be as comfortable as your mansion, but it's much safer." Grace was forced to agree with the man who had already done so much for her and her sick mother. The young woman spent all her days with Penelope. She cooked her dietary meals, gave her massages. With Brian's help, she took the woman out for walks. But as the days and months passed, Penelope's condition did not improve. Instead of coherent speech, the woman was mooing. Recently, however, she began to move her legs and one arm. These changes gave some hope. One day, during a walk, Grace saw two silhouettes approaching their house. She was startled and whispered quietly, "I wonder who it is?" Her daughter's excitement was transmitted to the sick woman. Penelope let out a surprised exclamation. Grace tried to reassure her. "Mom, don't worry, it's just two people walking down the road." And it seems one of the strangers, a woman, sick again, said something in her incomprehensible language. But Grace had learned over many months to parse her mother's speech. "No, Mom, it's not Justin." "No, Mom. No, I thought it was him at first, too. That's why I was scared." The strange travelers were close by. Grace could not believe her eyes, because the girl was a copy of herself. Such a meeting could not be tolerated even by a man with a strong psyche. Grace and her sick mother were not ready for such an ordeal. Grace froze in a daze. Penelope screamed. "I knew it." These were the first clearly spoken words from the sick woman. Grace didn't know whether to cry or rejoice. She fell to her knees in front of her mother, paying no attention to the guest standing a little farther away. "Mommy, you say it's a miracle. Mommy, you say it's a miracle. Say something else." Penelope nodded her head, repeating, "I knew she would come." "Your sister," Penelope said. Grace looked at her guest with wide eyes. Vivian could not control her emotions either. Noah hadn't expected such a turn of events. Of course, he guessed that Vivian had a twin sister, but he was confused by the presence of a sick woman. He began to explain confusingly to Grace. "Pardon us for intruding, but we didn't know your mom was sick." Grace stared at Vivian. She only had the strength to ask, "Are you my sister?" "I don't know," Vivian answered. "My mother never said anything about me having a sister. Maybe we just look alike." The guests and Grace herself forgot about Penelope for a while, so everyone flinched when the sick woman said distinctly, "You are sisters, sisters-in-law. I have kept this terrible secret from you for so many years, Grace, but the time has come to tell you." Penelope spoke quietly, and some words were difficult to make out, so her daughter had to repeat them. The sick woman's stories shocked everyone, even Noah, who had to see all sorts of things in his service. "I was the class leader and the first beauty in the class," Penelope continued. "All the boys tried to win my favor, but I paid no attention to anyone. Only Bill, a boy from a very poor family, was honored to walk me home. My parents did not forbid me to meet with a malleable boy, because Bill, although dressed poorly, was an excellent student. He solved complex problems in his mind, always helped me in math. As the years passed, the childhood friendship turned into true love. This transformation was noticed by my parents, and they were very worried. "That's it. It's time to finish with your absurd business," said my father. "I won't let my only daughter marry a commoner like Bill. It's not going to happen." "Daughter, Bill is a good boy, but he is not your match," my mother tried to soften my father's speech. "Think about what you'll get with a guy who doesn't have a father. At best, he'll get a job as a driver or fix cars," Penelope's mom said. Penelope cried. She didn't want to believe her mother. "Bill is an excellent student. He will get into a good university, and everyone will still be jealous of him," she objected. Father said in the same elevated tone, "To get into a good institute, you need money. And your Bill doesn't have a penny to his name." And that was the end of the conversation. But contrary to the predictions of Penelope's father, Bill went to a prestigious university. Already in the first year, the guy showed himself, becoming the winner of the competition. He was assigned a special scholarship, with which he managed to help his mother. In a word, Bill himself paved his own way to a bright future. Penelope, years of study, was by his side. When parents found out that their daughter did not obey them, they arranged their heiress such a razzle-dazzle that after him the girl went to the hospital. The mother was frightened, and the father suspected his daughter of simulation. "Don't you dare feel sorry for her. Let her stay in the hospital and think carefully," he ordered his wife. But the mother still secretly came to check on her daughter in the hospital. There she learned that Penelope was pregnant, and after a scandal with her father, she had a miscarriage. The first failed pregnancy had very severe consequences for the young woman. Soon she and her husband were never able to have children. Penelope went to doctors, went to the best resorts, but everything was useless. Once a friend with whom they worked together advised her to turn to the witch doctor. "This woman has helped many people. Try it. What if you're lucky, friend?" She wrote down on a piece of paper address healer and wished Penelope good luck. Knowing that her husband is extremely negative about all sorcerers and magicians, Penelope decided not to say anything to her husband. She said that she was going on a business trip. The woman went to the train station and bought a train ticket. Suddenly, an unkempt woman with 2 babies in her arms approached her. The stranger reeked of booze, and Penelope moved away from her. The woman noticed this and asked with a kind of exasperation, "What's not to like? Are you not used to such odors?" Penelope felt uncomfortable from the neighborhood with a tipsy woman, but there were no other vacant seats in the waiting room. The naughty mom continued to curse her life. "What am I supposed to do? There is no work. My husband also ran away. He and I didn't have time to get married. At least we had 1 child, but I was lucky. A whole set of twins. Tell me, where do I go with this good thing?" Penelope did not know what to answer. She tentatively suggested, "But there are social services. Apply there, you will help." "Have already helped," smirked Mom. "They sent me away and told me that I should have thought with my head when I was going to have children. And I didn't. It was an accident." The stranger talked too loudly, and they were noticed by people waiting for the train. Penelope decided to leave the building to get away from the unpleasant person. Suddenly, a baby cried from one of the packages, and the naughty mother said angrily, "He's already hungry. And what should I feed them with? There is no milk, and the mixture to buy on what to buy." Penelope took out her purse and began to count out the change. At the sight of crisp bills, the tipsy woman's eyes lit up. She moved close to Penelope and hotly whispered, "Look, I can see you're not poor. Buy a girl from me. I'll take her for cheap." Penelope was dumbfounded by such insolence. "Are you crazy? How can you offer such a thing?" "What are you yelling?" snarled Mom. "Do not want to take? I'll give the girl gypsies or someone else worse." Penelope shook not only her hands but also her teeth. She was no longer able to think rationally, took out a train ticket, and gave the beggar a few large bills. The mom smiled happily, snatching the money out of her hands. "Wow. Thank you for your generosity. It's enough for me to rent a place to stay for a few months." The stranger carelessly tossed the living bundle onto the bench and jogged toward the exit, cradling the second infant. Penelope remembers well what she thought at that moment: she would sell the second child to the gypsies. That's for sure. Something stirred in the blanket, and the woman gently took the baby. When she rang the apartment doorbell, she didn't know how she would explain the baby's appearance to her husband. Bill was surprised to see his wife. "Didn't you leave? How is your business trip?" The woman said firmly. "The business trip is canceled." "What do you mean, canceled?" The man didn't understand. "You missed the train?" Penelope, with a happy smile, handed her husband a package. "No, I didn't miss it. It's just that you and I now have a daughter." Only after these words Bill paid attention to the outstretched package. He exclaimed in horror, "It's a baby. But where did you get it?" Penelope told her husband everything without a word. Bill could not believe what his wife was saying. "It cannot be. You made it all up. How can you do that? It's a crime. We've got to get this little girl to an orphanage right now." "I'm not giving her away. I'm not giving her away," screamed the woman. "Don't you realize that God himself sent us a baby? This girl is a gift from heaven for all our suffering." For 25 years, the couple had been good parents to their adopted daughter. Only Bill left early. He did not live to see the day when the sisters, separated by their mother's fault, met a quarter of a century later. Everyone was impressed by the sick woman's story. Grace knelt down in front of her mother and kissed her hands. "Mommy, thank you for everything. You are the best thing in the world, and I don't want to see the one who sold me out." Vivian quietly mumbled, "You won't see her. She died a year ago. But I didn't even cry when she was buried. You, sister, were luckier than I was. You were loved, but my mother hated me and spoiled me with every morsel. And she sent me to work as a laborer and took all the money I earned. And she took all the money I earned. That's why I'm not the least bit sorry that she died." Penelope lured Vivian to her room. "Come here, baby." The girl approached the sick woman. Grace said something inaudible. Out of habit, Vivian translated her mother's speech. "Mommy said to let you stay with her. She thinks of you as her daughter, too, and is very much scolding herself for not taking you too then." "I'm not used to having a sister," Vivian said uncertainly. "My mother never told me anything. Now I understand why I was kidnapped by those two, who are no longer alive, and why your husband attacked me in the cafe, like a madman." Grace was surprised. "Did you see Justin?" Vivian briefly recounted the recent incident at the cafe. Grace, listening to her, said confidently, "This marriage has got to end. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I can imagine how surprised my husband will be when he sees me." Noah approached the girls. "Pardon me for intruding, but I heard you mention Mr. Roger in your conversation." "Yes, we did," confirmed Grace. "I should point out that your husband is facing not only a divorce, but a very real sentence for organizing a kidnapping. Unless, of course, you're willing to forgive him." Grace looked at Noah, and he saw so much pain in her eyes that he couldn't bear the look. "I could still forgive him, but what he did to Mom is unforgivable," the young woman said very quietly. Despite his advanced age, Dustin ran like a young man. In passing, he gave instructions to Grace's granddaughter. "Girls, arranging these chairs so that all the guests will fit on the list, have you seen?" Susan said with a grin. "Have you seen it, Grandpa? Because we made that list ourselves. You'd better sit on the sidelines because your running around makes me dizzy." The old man frowned guiltily. "Susan, I'm trying to help you." Susan waved the old man away and turned to Grace. "When is your wedding?" The girl was confused. "What wedding?" "Susan, I just had time to free myself from the bonds." Susan hugged the girl. "You'll think long enough, someone will take your Brian away. He's a good man, and he looks at you in a way that makes you realize he loves you." "He does," Grace said quietly, almost inaudibly. "And I love him very much, too."